EC 358, approving the agreement between the Albuquerque Fire Rescue and the Albuquerque Ambulance Service for the provision of ambulance services. I move approval. There's a motion and a second. Is there anyone signed up to speak? Any questions from the administration? Questions from counselors? There's a motion and a second for EC 358. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion passes. We are now on EC 359, approval of the second supplement agreement to the general fund monies to the FY19 social service contract with Youth Development Incorporated for job training stipends for high school students enrolled in the Job Mentor Program. I move approval.
Second.
There's a motion and a second for approval of EC 359. All those questions? Anyone signed up to speak? No. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion passes. We are now on EC 360, approval of a contract to amend to Peter Winograd. I move approval.
Second.
There's a motion and a second for approval of EC 360. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion passes. We are now on item 14, final actions. I think we will, if we want to go, move the agenda around and go to Councillor Gibson for RA1.
Thank you, Madam President. 1 second, I'm a little behind. Where is it? Here it is. Approvals. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Oh. It was hiding in plain sight. So thank you, Madam President. I'm going to move RA 19-1, which is amending the City Council Rules of Procedure, Article 2, Section 4, and Article 3, Section 21. And actually what I'm going to do is move the floor, is it the floor substitute for that.
So there's a motion and a second for, to move the floor sub to RA 19-1. All those in favor say yes.
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 Opposed, no. Motion passes. We're back on the bill.
Okay, so
Floor sub.
this started out with what I was, my intention was just to eradicate that particular committee, and turns out not very many people agreed with me, so we took a second look at it, and actually maybe Ms. Yara can take us through what the committee, what the rules amendment
Yes.
says now.
Yes, Madam President, Councillor Gibson. So the floor substitute to this rules amendment would maintain the Internal Operations Committee of the City Council. It is proposing that this committee be made up of all 9 members of the council, so that to allow for each member to weigh in, especially for the budgetary issues. It would require the committee to have a regular quarterly meeting and other special meetings as needed. And it goes on further to kind of address the issue of our funding of council requests. So by April of each year, the Director of Council Services would need to present to the Internal Operations Committee the projections at that time of whether or not the council services budget would have excess funding to accommodate counselor program requests. Of course, that would be contingent upon final audit of that fiscal year, but usually by that time, we have a pretty good idea of what would be remaining.
Any questions from the council? Counselor Counselor Jones.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is, of course, Ms. Yara or Councilor Gibson, what kind of items will be funded out of this? It says councilor project requests. Would that be like we have in the past where we fund special events? And at one time, I remember we limited to 2 consecutive years in order to fund those. Are those types of checks and balances still in place?
Madam President, Councilor Jones, those requirements and criteria have been informal, but we could maintain those as they have been in the past. Also, the council can have a further discussion on how they would like those programs to be limited, vetted, and maybe restrict an organization to a 2-year grant, as it were.
Thank you, Madam President. May I ask one more question?
Counselor Jones.
And then the question, of course, is we probably need to, I believe I would ask if the sponsor would defer this, and let's sit down and talk about what some of the requirements are to participate in this, like if we are, a counselor would like to sponsor a specific event or a community thing. In the past, it's required a budget, a formal budget. I think that we need to refine this a little bit and just make sure it's not too open-ended, because it should never be a slush fund for us, but it should be being able to use the unused funds, but to do it in a wise and fair and consistent way.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Counselor Gibson.
Sorry, I'll be brief. I just wanted to acknowledge what you're saying, and I agree with you. I didn't put that in here. It wasn't in the earlier one, so, but I agree. I think I would like to have a little bit better definition and maybe process in that. So I'll move for deferral.
Second?
Well, there's a motion and a second on the floor for a deferral, but Counselor Sanchez.
Well, that was going to be my comment, because it is a floor substitute. We have to defer it anyway, so.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second on the floor for a deferral. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Yes, and
Opposed, no.
Madam President, I just want to indicate that that would be deferred to the April 15th meeting. Thank you.
Could we possibly defer this to the May 6th meeting? Because that's when I will be, we'll be hearing my rules amendment. And actually, some of the things that Councilor Jones is requesting is within those amendments that I'm making, and we can kind of incorporate all the changes.
Madam President, yes, because you just voted on that other deferral, if somebody would make another motion to defer to the May 6th meeting?
There's a motion, a second for a deferral of R19-1 to May 6th. All those in favor say yes. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Thank you, Councilor Gibson. We are now back on final actions. Councilor Benton and Winter.
Thank you, Madam President. This is Community Substitute 2-0-23, amending Chapter 9, Article 4, Part 1, ROA 1994, the Police Oversight Ordinance. I move a do pass. And Madam President, I know we have, we probably have some folks signed up to speak, and we do have some amendments, so maybe if we take the public comments first.
Thank you. Our first speaker will be Peter Simonson, followed by Ed Hardness, followed by Nancy Cohensberg. Mandy, we're going to start at 11.
Madam President, members of the council, my name is Peter Simonson. I'm the executive director for the ACLU and also a member of the APD Forward Coalition. Thanks again for all the work that's gone into this ordinance, to these amendments. I'm not actually going to address the subpoena provision. Nancy Koenigsberg, also a member of APD Forward, will talk to you about that, but I think we've worked out a reasonable proposal with city attorneys, which we've offered to Councilor Benton, and I believe that may be what is in front of you. I just wanted to speak to the proposed amendment. I assume it'll go forward today, changing the way that the budget for the CPOA is calculated, removing the requirement that it be a percentage of APD's budget. You may recall that when the task force that made recommendations on overhauling the police oversight body made their recommendations, one of those key recommendations, one of the major recommendations, was that the budget be calculated this way to try and preserve as much independence for that body as possible. You know, you can imagine the CPOA takes some pretty difficult positions on issues that can be controversial. The APD just recently released its use of force reports, and there's some indication that there's some disparity based on race in the way use of force has been meted out over the last couple of years. Those are the kinds of issues that can cause public pressure to be brought on the city council, and as it concerns their decisions about any sort of budgeting that is done for the CPOA, it's our concern that if it's not done in this independent way, the budgeting could actually be subject to some sort of politics around the controversy that concerns the CPOA's work. We have a very benevolent city council right now. I think it's very supportive of the CPOA, but it's not hard to imagine a time in the not too distant future where that could change. And just based on the politics of the issues they deal with, it could create some undue influence on their budget. So I'll leave it at that.
Counselor Winter.
Madam President, so is that the only comments you had? Is there any other comments that you had that you want to say?
Madam President, Councilor Winter, I'm going to leave the comments
Okay.
about the subpoena to my colleague Nancy Kienderberg.
Counselor Harris.
And yes, and if there was any whiff that the city council was using the budget to prevent the CPOA from doing its work, I think someone named Peter Simonson would see us in federal court right away. So I'm not worried about that. I think the state legislature could be not funding the state courts if they didn't like what they were doing. You know, the Congress could be doing the same thing. I mean, we just don't do that around here, and if we did, I think you'd be one of the first people to hold us accountable. I mean, we are the body of the government that budgets money and spends money, and we have that accountability, and we should, you know, we should exercise it wisely and prudently, and we do, and we will.
Any other questions?
You look like you want to respond, so I'll ask you a question. Would you like to respond, Mr. Simonson?
Thank you, Councilor Harris. Madam President, yeah, I would just say that, you know, certainly I don't think that there is any necessary ability of the ACLU, for example, to actually bring a suit on behalf of the CPOA. Their own attorneys may try to bring suit, but obviously we would have to find some way for them to have standing, for the issues to be constitutional in nature, for us to try and raise them. So I don't know that the ACLU is the place where you would want to resort to for some sort of defense of the CPOA. Again, I would just say that for the sake of ensuring the body's independence, we think that budgetary arrangements serves the best interests of that principle.
Thank you, Madam President. And I understand perfectly what you're saying. However, as the body that is supposed to be fiscally responsible to our citizens, I believe a raise to a board, an appointed board that is predicated upon the raise of taxes to the citizens in order to support other issues is not very diligent on our part, and perhaps we could change it so it's a smaller percentage. Now you're going to say, well, what if you cut the budget of the police and it'll go down? Same thing. I think we have to be very diligent about how we do this. I am very uncomfortable just doing a blanket. There's a raise going to be put in for this body when in fact it's not needed. So I'm very uncomfortable with putting this size of raise in there without some justification for it, other than it meets the percentage number of the budget to APD.
Any other questions, comments? No, thank you. Thank you. Mr. Ed Harness.
Madam President, Honorable Council, good evening. Thank you for this opportunity. I would also like to thank the council for their work on this ordinance. I know it's been quite a bit of work, and we appreciate all of the efforts that have taken place. Regarding the subpoena power, I think that we've reached a great collaboration with all the parties to address Councilor Davis's concerns about the board being able to compel cooperation. The way that we envision this happening through the administrative subpoena, it would be incumbent upon the CPOA to get a court to enforce that compulsion. So if an entity chose not to follow the subpoena, our remedy would be to get it enforced in the court as opposed to the opposite. So I think that that protection has been built in. Regarding the budget, I hear the councilors and their concerns. I will point out that in fiscals year 2016 and 2017, the City Council did allocate an extra $100,000. So some of those returned monies were inflated. We are also funded by the general fund, and we are not taking funds from public safety. We are budgeted through the general funds, line 110, I believe. And I'm going to quote Getting It Right, a Seton Hall Law Review article. For the Oversight Board to be free from political manipulation that could weaken it, its funding must be both secure and sufficiently robust. Otherwise, a hostile administration could deprive the board of its ability to perform its duties by simply cutting its fundings. To insulate the Oversight Board from cuts to fundings due to politically unpopular decisions, the budget should be tied to a fixed percentage of the police department's non-capital budget. Thus, if the police department's operating budget increases to hiring of additional police officers.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Madam President. I understand what you're saying, Mr. Harness, but right now, the budget, the board's budget is a minimum, equal to at a minimum 0.5% of APD's annual operating budget. This year, there will be police vehicles put into that operating budget. Their operating budget has been increased by the issuance of a new gross receipts tax. That will increase the budget to this board, this body, a great deal, and I think we have to get a little more control over it than that. So there is an amendment here by Councilor Sanchez that I would absolutely support. It is up to the council to fund it adequately. We can always fund more if needed, but I believe to have an open-ended percentage of the APD's annual operating budget is, as we put more and more and more money, as we will this year, into their operating budget, I believe that's foolhardy. But thank you for your opinion.
Councillor Sanchez.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Harness, I want to thank you for your comments. But going back to the first year that you were in this position, there was a shortfall with the funding that was appropriated to your department, and the city councilors came back and appropriated additional money to assure that you were properly funded. If that is the case again, you can come back to the council and present your issues and why you need additional money. But, you know, we've never let your department down. We've kept it as independent as we possibly can, and I think you can speak for that. We've never interfered in the work that you've done, but I personally believe that when you come to the council, just like the Internal Audit Department, just like the Inspector General, you know, they are independent offices away from the administration and from this council, but when it comes to budgetary issues, they do come before the Albuquerque City Council.
Councillor Harris.
And some examples, I'm not going to mention what mayor we're talking about, but you can probably figure it out. But I worked, when I first came on the council with the mayor, who a couple times would try to starve a particular agency because he didn't like what they did. In each instance, the city council wouldn't allow him to do it because the council is the appropriating body, and there's 9 of us. And there's a woman up who's always there from the Albuquerque Journal, who's watching these meetings. And if we started going sideways like that, you'd be here, she'd be writing about it. So I think there's a lot of built-in protections that politically, you know, I don't think, even if, first of all, I don't think anyone would want to, because we know the work you do is very important. But even if we did, I think we wouldn't be able to get away with it. So I think that let's go with these amendments, and if there is a problem, then I'm sure you'll be one of the first ones to let us know. Thank you, sir. I do appreciate your work.
Counselor Benton.
I think I can see both sides of this, but, I mean, I do think that kind of the key language is a dedicated and independent source of funding. Without naming a percentage of the budget, I don't know how that could be characterized as dedicated and independent if it's being presented in this way. At the same time, I really do understand that because of the extraordinary amount of money that we're putting into APD, in these times anyway, and that could change, and I wanted to ask about that, how difficult would it be for us to adjust this as we see it, these issues fluctuate of how much we're paying annually. But it seems to me that there needs to be a dedicated percentage, and that it's our responsibility to determine if that is going out of whack, and we need to adjust it. But that's just I don't know. I'm asking a question, I'm not sure of whom, but perhaps Mr. Harness.
Yes, Madam President, Councilor Benson, I think that, excuse me, one of the considerations is that the percentage is not of the entire APD budget and all of their expenditures. There are portions of APD's budgets which are shielded from that percentage. Mm-hmm. And so that's one caveat. The other caveat is that as we, a city, increase our department size, it will increase our volume as far as complaints. Just this first quarter of the year, we have already logged 100 complaints as of March 31st. So there will be, we've tried to increase our efficiencies within the agency as we do as many preliminary investigations as possible to not do full investigations. In looking at contracting investigations, we're being quoted $2,500 per investigation. So certainly our expenditures are going to increase if our volume continues to increase as such.
Counselor Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just while we have Mr. Harness, maybe we'll jump into these. And I know it sounded like he had some other comments, and I hope he had an opportunity to finish. But on this point, and we'll get to it, I'm sure, on this amendment, though I'm inclined to say that I want to be sure that we do provide a minimum amount of funding for the agency, and they can always come back for extra if extraordinary things come about. But I do think it's important, both in terms of hiring. It is different than AGO or Inspector General. I guess it is in some way that way. But to hire staff in an independent organization, you need recurring dollars to do it. You need some certainty to your staff that they'll be around next year and that those jobs can be done. But I also think that we're setting a minimum floor, and I think that's an expectation. It's a commitment from the city that we believe in the mission of the CPOA, and we're going to fund it accordingly. So I think I would like to, I'm welcome to hear more about that from your thoughts, although I think we've sort of beat that horse to death. I would like to go back to the subpoena question just a minute, and I appreciate very much you addressing my question. But I think the idea that if the board authorizes a subpoena and someone wanted to challenge it, it will be up to the court to make that decision. I think that's well placed and well articulated. My concern is more about sort of how the process works. Say, if a domestic violence victim might be a witness to an interaction that resulted in a complaint, through the criminal process, the district attorney has a closed grand jury. They have a process. The court can do closed hearings and other things. It concerns me that perhaps without some limits or direction that this be limited to government records. The Police Oversight Board could send a subpoena for, say, a person who didn't want to cooperate, as some of the board members articulated last time, and bring uncooperative witnesses in a very public forum or do so. And I think I'm inclined to believe that the court would defer that this council made a decision that investigation was important enough to give that extraordinary power. So I'm curious, like, sort of your thoughts on compelling cooperative witnesses, say subpoenaing cell phone records from witnesses that might contain other personal data that might get captured in there. I think there are a lot of things in there that are very complicated, more so than the average person could defend in a courtroom for this very specialized area of law. And honestly, I'm still a little hesitant on the right structure of that power, although I do think it's important.
Madam President, Councilor Davis, I believe that those protections have been written in based upon the concerns of city legal, so that there's a three-pronged process that must be satisfied in order for myself to get the board to even approve the subpoena. And there's also a provision for third-party notification, so that if in fact, in the instance of cell phone records, if I'm subpoenaing Verizon, the owner of that cell phone number must be notified as well that we are in fact subpoenaing those, and that we have a nexus to do so, that it's related to the work of the agency and an investigation, that it's not simply a random request. Beyond that, I think the person being subpoenaed can ignore the subpoena, and then it's incumbent upon us to have a court enforce that, and that way they will have the court make a decision whether or not they need to cooperate with the subpoena, as opposed to them having to proactively seek relief with the court.
Thank you, Mr. Harness, and thank you, Madam President. I would like to continue this conversation. It might be more appropriate when we get to that amendment, but I'd still like to pick that up at some point. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Jones?
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Aguilar, does this subpoena and some of this information, along with the additional money, how we affect the money, does that have any conflict with the CASA?
Madam President, Councilor Jones, the subpoena language does not conflict with the CASA. The CASA, which is the court-adopted or approved settlement agreement for the Department of Justice case that we're involved with, only requires that the city provide the agency with subpoena power. So the language as written in the amendment we feel adequately protects the constitutional rights of those subjected to subpoena, as well as the confidentiality of witnesses and any person under investigation by the agency. So we feel that does not conflict with the CASA and is appropriate. The second question, I believe, related to the amendment regarding the percentage. Paragraph 272 of the CASA provides that the agency, the police oversight agency, shall remain accountable to but independent from the office of the mayor, the city attorney's office, as well as the city council. So by requiring the agency to go through the normal budgeting process, that is a mechanism for the council to maintain that accountability. For the agency to maintain that accountability to the city council. The three essential functions that the agency does perform as required by the CASA are to investigate civilian complaints, review serious uses of force involving uses of force and officer-involved shootings, and making policy recommendations. So provided that the agency receives a sufficient budget to meet those functions, then the city will not be in violation of the CASA. And so if the agency does not receive an adequate budget to perform those functions, then the city would be in violation, and as was alluded to earlier, I am presuming that matter would be raised by the court.
Okay. And if I may, I'm sorry, I couldn't get your attention, Madam President. I'll go ahead and pass on that. I'll let
Just a question, Mr. Harness. I didn't quite understand. So do you support the subpoena authority as it's written, or you had issues about having to go to another body to enforce it? I didn't understand.
Madam President, Councilor Harris, no, I support the amendment that's before you today.
Oh, okay.
Councilor Borrego?
For Mr. Aguilar, So on, I guess, the second page of the amendment, number, I think it's number 6. C, the city attorney for the city of Albuquerque, what is the relationship? Okay, let's just say that a subpoena, you know, the board, hypothetically, there's a subpoena. And what is the role of the city attorney exactly in this portion of the amendment?
I am presuming you're referring to
Item
8.
6C on the second page of Amendment D.
Madam President, Councilor Borrego, that is simply to provide our office with notice that a subpoena has been served. We do not play any role in the execution or service or processing of these administrative
So
subpoenas.
there's only a notification from Mr. Harness's office to the city attorney, and that's it?
Madam President, Councilor Borrego, that is correct.
Anyone else signed up to? Counselor Jones.
One more, I'm sorry. Mr. Aguilar, there's a question in here about the subpoena and also the access to records. I mean, there's quite a bit of this in here. Is that going to be produced and presented or asked for by the director? And if it is going to be asked for, any of the subpoena and its information that they want to get and how they go about it, will that information be going only to the investigators? Or will it go directly to, and then the investigators give a report to the board? Or is it something that the board will have initial access to the information that's subpoenaed? Some of it seems to be a little invasive.
Madam President, Councilor Jones, my understanding is that all information received from the use of a subpoena shall remain confidential. As far as the process to get there, I can defer to Mr. Harness to explain the function, but basically the agency is independent and separate than the board, and they perform distinct functions, but I can defer to Mr. Harness to explain that specific process.
Thank you, Mr. Aguilar. Mr. Harness?
Madam President and Councilor Jones, I think it's important to distinguish perhaps the process under which the information is being requested. Access to information such as data in the performance of policy analysis will be going to the board. Subpoena, as it relates to a civilian complaint, would go to the investigator and be in the investigative file. The investigative file is available upon request by the board. However, the board normally reviews a case by looking at the findings letter and does not review the entire investigative file.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harness. Our next speaker is Nancy Cohensberg, followed by Chantal Galloway, followed by our last speaker, Tad Naminsky.
Good evening, Madam President and members of the board. I was prepared to talk about the subpoena. Many of the things that I was going to address have already been discussed. However, I'll go over a couple of points which may be helpful. I think something to think about is that this administrative subpoena power is not unusual for the city of Albuquerque. There are already a few other entities that have it. The Board of Ethics and Campaign Practices, the City Labor Management and Relations Board, the City Auditor, and the Inspector General. I think one of the things that we did here and had a very collaborative meeting and helpful meeting with the City Attorney Office as well as the CPOA was to address what are the necessary pieces of a process. And we basically pulled that from a case, a New Mexico Supreme Court case that is actually based on a United States Supreme Court case about what administrative subpoena powers are. And they are now set forth directly in the ordinance, which they were not before. So I think it's clearer in paragraph J3, the parts about that in terms of breadth, that the inquiry is within the authority of the CPOA, so it has to be focused, that the demand is not too indefinite, a precise request, and the information is reasonably relevant to the purpose of the investigation, so it can't be a fishing expedition. And if an individual chose not to comply, then it is upon Mr. Harness to go to court, and a court would be examining those factors very, very closely. So I think as a group, we believe that the ordinance, as the amendment is structured, complies with state law, is consistent with the kind of subpoena power that other administrative agencies have, and there are protections in terms of process and confidentiality. So we would move that the council adopt this amendment.
Councilor Borrego?
Mrs. Kensington?
Koenigsberg.
Kingsburg, I'm sorry. So, and Mr. Aguilar, so are there actually like administrative rules of procedure for these other boards that you mentioned, the Board of Ethics, the City Auditor, the Inspector General, I mean, is there actual information, administrative, of what, can be asked for within those groups, within those boards?
Madam President, Councilor Borrego, not codified or spelled out like in the amendment here before the council today.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Benton, you didn't have anything? Okay. Our next speaker is Chantal Galloway.
Good evening, Council President Pena and members of City Council. I'm not going to talk about subpoena power, I'm not going to talk about the budget, I just want to highlight a couple of other points that the board did take positions on. This is dated back to the January 17th iteration of the City Council draft before you. So on page 8, beginnings with line 19 through 21, it talks about the PII information on APD's raw data. And the board has no interest in obtaining that raw data ourselves. In conversations that had been had previously with the parties and with the APOA, it had kind of been agreed upon that we would receive redacted information, and that is something that we would like to continue. So if the ordinance could provide for that, rather than that we would receive the raw data and then be expected to redact that information, we would appreciate that. Page 14, lines 1 and 2, the board recommended striking the language in that, and it has to do with only 2 committees, board members serving on only 2 committees, and while we don't expect to find ourselves in the situation that we're in now, if that language were in there and if we were prohibited from serving on more than 2 committees, we would not be able to function. Right now, I personally serve on 3, just so that we can continue doing our business that we're tasked with. Page 19, line 7, and it kind of ties in with Councilor Sanchez's Amendment L. The board recommends that the ordinance reflect the language set forth by City HR in the Executive Director's current contract that was renewed, that says Executive Director will be a full-time, unclassified contractual city employee. Page 19, I won't even go through all of the language. You guys, I think, have that before you. I can if you want. I do have it, but the language that we propose is recommended by our attorney, and we would ask that you guys adopt that. I have 2 more if it's, okay, thank you. Page 20, beginning with line 31 through page 21, line 2, the board recommends striking the language as it violates the CASA. And then page 21, section D, beginning on line 22, the board believes and would be willing to adopt a code of ethics similar to the one that City Council adopts. In lieu of inclusion of that particular language in the ordinance, we feel like that's a more appropriate place to have that language. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, thank you. Our final speaker, Tad Naminsky.
Thank you. My name is Ted Niemiecki. What I'd like to talk tonight about subpoena power and trust. Can we trust APD, community, I mean. Subpoena power, denying POB, what is the nonsense? I have access to, without subpoena, to APD evidence, film, through city clerk office. So that's, every citizen can do that with subpoena. But POB, no, that's a bunch of baloney, you know. Let me tell you that. Can we trust APD? No, we cannot trust. Simply, well, let me start from Council Sanchez, friends and family in APD, employee. Friends, family, and a relative. Well, I understand he has at least two sons, one son and one son-in-law. One son, his son was involved in the accident, hit from behind one woman. And I don't want to go to the detail. And then what's happened?
Mr.
After this accident,
can you direct your comments through me, please?
After the accident, there was no police report, no lapel camera either. That's how can we trust APD and council right here who working on this issue. Yes, that's right. I don't want to talk about corruption in government, which is legal for some people. Now, oh well, I don't have time to develop.
Thank you. That was our final speaker, so now we are back on the committee sub and the amendments. Are we ready to go through them? We have, our first amendment is floor amendment, and I think we're starting on number 11 from where we left off at our last meeting. So, Councilor Benton.
This brings us back to the subpoena question, and Councilors, Mr. Melendez pointed out something important. The comma, I think we were talking about last time. If you look at this amendment, this would be amendment number 1, so I'll go ahead and move it for discussion purposes. But the CPO, under subpoenas, number 1, CPOA is authorized to issue subpoenas only as necessary to investigate civilian complaints, comma, that was the comma, I think, or to audit or monitor incidents for use of force by police. So I would move that, or either move or suggest that as an amendment to the amendment. But going on, I mean, this, I'll have Mr. Melendez explain the changes from last discussion.
Thank you, Madam President. Councilor Benton, with your motion, the amendment would be moved with the comma as read in to the record. This is the subpoena amendment that has been discussed at length now with the speakers, and it's been described. If you have any other questions, City Legal worked on this with the advocates. I'll try to answer, and if not, City Legal can help with any questions about this particular subpoena amendment.
Mr. Aguilar, would you like to summarize where we are with this? Thanks.
Yeah, Madam President, Councilor Benton, I think procedurally the council would move the amendment, the floor amendment first. It would get seconded, and then you can proceed with the secondary amendment.
With the comma.
The comma.
Okay, so yeah, I move the amendment as it was written. And
A motion second for floor amendment number 11.
And then I'll move that change to add the comma in the second line of item 1.
There's a motion and a second to add whatever Counselor Benton just said. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. It's added, Counselor.
Okay, all right. So now we'll hear the discussion on summary of what this says. Mr. Aguilar.
Summary?
Can you summarize where we are with this change on subpoena?
Madam President, Councilor Benton, I think that the amendment's probably before the floor and can add the comma.
Okay. Well, I will read the amendment just for the record. So on page 14, line 23 through page 15, line 23, replace subsection J in its entirety as followed. J, subpoenas. 1, the CPOA is authorized to issue subpoenas only as necessary to investigate civilian complaints, comma, or to audit and monitor incidences of use of force by police. 2, prior to issuing a subpoena, the executive director must make a reasonable attempt to exhaust all other avenues for obtaining the information sought. 3, in order to issue an administrative subpoena, the executive director must ensure that A, the inquiry is within the authority of the CPOA, B, the demand is not too indefinite, and C, the information is reasonably relevant to the purpose of the investigation. D, that all other criteria for the issuance of an administrative subpoena as set forth by New Mexico law are met. 4, the executive director must obtain authorization from the board in order to issue a subpoena. 5, subpoenas shall not be served in a manner that complies, the subpoenas shall be served in a manner that complies with all requirements for administrative subpoenas under New Mexico law. 6, a subpoena must provide at least 14 calendar days notice prior to the deadline for responding to the subpoena to A, the subpoenaed person or entity, B, any individual or entity that's the subject of subpoenaed records, and C, the city attorney for the city of Albuquerque. 7, the subpoena and notice to third parties must include a citation to this section and state that the recipient has the opportunity to challenge the subpoena to the board or in the district court having jurisdiction. 8, the summoned person or entity or any person or entity that is subject of subpoenaed records may petition the board or the district court of the county where he or she resides to vacate or modify the administrative subpoena. 9, in the case of a refusal to obey a subpoena issued to any person, the director may make application to the district court in the state having jurisdiction to order the witness to appear before the board and to produce evidence, if so ordered, or to give testimony touching on the matter in question. 10, any summoned person may, at his or her own expense, be represented by legal counsel during all CPOA or board proceedings. 11, the CPOA and board shall not disclose any record obtained as a result of a subpoena that is protected or confidential by law, ordinance, policy, or the CASA. So this language was revised with additional discussion with stakeholders, and it does still implement the purpose and requirement of the subpoena authority under the CASA.
Counselor Borrego, then Counselor Sanchez.
For the maker of the amendment, the sponsor of the amendment, I would like to suggest possibly a friendly amendment to item 3D and 5 to cite the sections that deal with New Mexico law for this particular, because I mean, it says, all other criteria for the issuance of administrative subpoenas as set forth by New Mexico law. Would it be appropriate, Mr. Aguilar, to cite the sections of the law that deal with subpoenas? And then also number 5.
Madam President, Councilor Borrego, the council certainly could. We felt that this was most appropriate and adequately summed up the intent of the council and covered the law.
Madam President, This particular reference to state law is based on case law set by the New Mexico Supreme Court, so there's not a statutory section that you'd be able to cite. It's just a matter of the common law of New Mexico. Madam President, since it's established by case law and that precedent can change over time, it may be a little bit misleading to try to enter that citation as to the specific case, because in the event that something changes or it's stated another way, then our explanation will not be complete. So it'd be incumbent upon somebody to understand what that law is.
Okay. I was just thinking in terms of guidance.
Counselor Sanchez.
Thank you, Madam President. I know at the previous special meeting, one of the issues that was discussed was not discussed by Mr. Aguilera, but one of the other city attorneys. And I know that you've done some work and revised this amendment in regards to the Supreme Court ruling on a different case where they ruled against the agency. Would this resolve these issues with these amendments?
Madam President, Councilor Sanchez, Lindsay Van Meter from our office is here, and she can address that, but the short answer is yes.
Thank you. That's correct. The amendments, as proposed here tonight, address two specific provisions of case law, including the case that I cited at the last special meeting, which was in Ray Chavez, which requires notice to third parties that their documents are being summoned or subpoenaed. And the other case is the In Re Governor's Investigation into Criminal Organization. I can't get the whole name right. It's very long. And it's that particular section is reflected now in J3, and that's the provision that requires that that the inquiry be within the authority of the CPOA, the demand is not too indefinite, and the information is reasonably relevant to the purpose of the investigation. And for good measure, there's D, that all other criteria for the issuance of an administrative subpoena as set forth by New Mexico law are met, and that's to address the issue of potentially changing case law.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Counselor Gibson.
Thank you. Ms. Van Meter, sorry, I wasn't quick enough. It sounds like there's protection for third party. That's what you were talking about before, right? So here's another little question. On 3B, the demand is not too indefinite. Who decides what's indefinite?
Ultimately, it would go to a judge to decide that, and it's strangely worded, and we did have a significant discussion with APD Forward regarding that language and attempting to find other language that would be more clearly understood. But at the end of the day, this language comes straight from a United States Supreme Court case, and it's probably the best language, because if you say the demand is not vague, that means something different than it's not too indefinite. You want to be able to pinpoint what's being asked for.
Okay. And then here's just a general last question for you. How does this amendment, how is this significantly different than what we have in the ordinance right now?
In the ordinance right now, there's one mention of a subpoena, and it does not actually address the civilian, the investigations. I believe it is in reference to audits. The CPOA attempted in the past to subpoena documents and was unable to do so, or was informed that they were unable to do so by their counsel. I would have to defer to Mr. Harness on that. The short of it was, this language spells out the due process requirements for everyone and makes it clear that the authority is there to do to issue subpoenas.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If we've exhausted that part, I wanted to add a different question to this. I think in reading Section 4, it mentions that the executive director must obtain authorization from the board in order to issue a subpoena. It's not clear exactly how the board might process that, and it sort of leaves it, I think, a little vague in terms of how they would make that decision. I don't believe this is how it would be, but without more guidance, I believe it's possible that the board could delegate that decision to the chair or to an individual member or a subcommittee. And so I think I would like to propose an amendment to Councilor Benton's amendment that would read, my apologies, amending section J4 of the Amendment D. A simple majority vote of the membership of the board in favor is required before the subpoena may be issued. Thank you. This would require that the sort of this extraordinary power we're giving them, at least the exercise thereof, would have to go to the board for public discussion, so that the public is aware and can sort of hold the board accountable to the process about being sure that we've exhausted all those other means. I think it's just good practice, and it helps us do that.
Any discussion, Councilor Sanchez?
Thank you, Madam President. I support that amendment. One of the concerns that I would have, would that be through executive session, or would it be through a public forum where possibly a name could be leaked, and that's been a problem in the past?
Thank you, Madam President. I think we had sort of speculated around this a little bit and sort of kicking the idea around. I would defer to the city attorney and, of course, the members of the board. I think ideally, if the process is followed, I think it's the case number 12345 regarding Officer X is how it's supposed to be done. They need to seek from witness Y this information, which is not available elsewhere, and they've asked politely and done other things. I think the process that we've seen the board go through, if they follow their own rules, this could be done in a public way, just like any other discussion of other investigations. If those, like disclosure, for example, were violated either on the front end of the subpoena or the back end, once they get the data, I think we've now written in some rules that can hold those accountable for that. But I don't know how we avoid it either way, either before or after, but I do think the board has to be cognizant of those rules, and they have to enforce it on themselves. But I would defer to the city attorney, maybe Mr. Harness, if they have any input on that.
Councilor Harris?
Just one quick comment. I think the subpoena itself is going to be a public document, so I don't see the problem with having the deliberations be public also, especially with those protections that Councilor Davis talked about.
Okay, so there's, oh, Mr. Harness?
Madam President, actually, I was going to defer to Attorney Aguilar based upon discussions we had regarding this provision where there was a conscious decision to take out the majority vote for the board. What we saw were issues with the Open Meetings Act and how the board reaches a decision about an investigation which later on they will be tasked with reviewing and making a decision, along with airing specific information about an investigation to the public, along with the practical timing of monthly meetings and meeting 90 or 120-day investigative timelines. I believe that it is well within the board's purview to delegate the authority to the chair with the protections as laid out in the ordinance that show that all of the provisions are being met so that the investigator and the investigation can move forward, because I don't believe we really want a public airing of investigations prior to the full investigation being completed. I think that there are confidences not only for those that are subject of the investigation, but those other witnesses as well. Aside from the board then making a decision about an investigation, which later on they're going to review again and make a final decision. So for those concerns, in discussions with APD Forward, City Legal, the Department of Justice, that's why there was the decision to remove the 2/3 vote for the board, because we don't believe that the OMA would allow that type of discussion to be held in a closed session.
Madam Chair, if I can, I don't want to take all night on this, but if I could
Councilor
respond
Davis.
back. I wanted to, you wanted to defer to Mr. Aguilar, so I want to, if that's appropriate, get in there, I defer there as well. I understand, and I totally understand that. I just, I believe it's important that we have the subpoena power for the board for all the reasons that have been articulated, and we've seen in the past that There have been places where the police department, for example, was not cooperative with the power that we've given you all. We needed some extraordinary remedy. But I do think this is an extraordinary power we grant to a civilian board in the course of their investigations. And I just want to be sure that, like, exercising those extraordinary things, we're absolutely clear that there's no other option. I don't discount that you, Mr. Harness, would abuse this, but I do think when we get into these areas, I'm just concerned that we want to articulate to the public when we need to go to those extraordinary measures. But it's been my experience that subpoenas can be issued sort of in a closed way, in a private way, under some of those other rules, but I want to defer to the lawyers because I'm not one. Mr. Aguilar?
Madam President,
Mr. Aguilar.
Madam President, Councilor Davis, the CASA only provides at paragraph 283 that the agency itself shall have the subpoena authority, not the Police Oversight Board. So the question about the role or the function of the board as it relates to the subpoena process is a policy decision. But if there is a function that the council intends for the board to play, that would not conflict with the CASA, nor would the removal of the board or the role of the board in the subpoena process. That also would not conflict with the CASA.
And Mr. Aguilar and Madam President, if the council were to add this provision that required some sort of affirmative action by the board still has the flexibility to enact its own rules about how to conduct that hearing or that process that could protect privacy in the way they do with other investigations.
Madam President, Councilor Davis, presumably. I haven't analyzed that, but I'm happy to look at that specific question.
Thanks. Thank you, Madam President.
So, not hearing any more questions, we actually have a motion second on the floor for, would we call this amendment number 2 to the amendment?
Madam President, correct, amendment number 2 to amendment 11.
Okay. Amendment number 2 to amendment number 11. So all those in favor say yes? Opposed, no? What do we have? Yeah, a show of hands. The yeses? And then no? No. 2 noes. You got that? Okay, so the amendment passes, so the 2 amendments to amendment number 11, and now we're back on amendment number 11. Are there any more comments or questions? Actually, I just, there's a lot of the discussion, so, the subpoena power, so let's say we didn't support this. Do we have the subpoena power ability already in place, or is this outlining that we have subpoena power?
Madam President, that was the question that Ms. Van Meter was discussing before, that the current language in the ordinance provides subpoena power only for the audit function. So this improves and clarifies the function of the subpoena for the agency.
Okay, and then in legal terms, I'm gonna be redundant, and I'm gonna ask the question about the demand to indefinite on number 3. B, and then on 3C, the information is reasonably relevant. So those just seem kind of open-ended. Can you kind of clarify that for me?
Madam President, again, I could ask Ms. Van Meter to step
Yeah,
to come up.
and she explained, so I guess she's going to explain what she had already explained. No? Okay. I just want to make sure, because it just, from a layman's perspective, it just seems so open-ended.
Absolutely, Your Honor, I'm sorry, Madam President. It's getting late. So the courts have defined this in such a way to grant substantial leeway to the administrative agency. And so by saying that it's not too indefinite, you're saying that it has to be definite enough to understand. It doesn't have to be precise. It doesn't have to be incredibly clear. So it is just enough for a person to be able to understand, and it errs on the side of not being too restrictive on the agency. And the same thing with the second wording, reasonably relevant to the purpose of the investigation. So again, this is the courts choosing to defer some broader authority to agencies. They're not saying it has to be exactly relevant. They're not saying it has to be entirely relevant. It's similar to the discovery rules in courts, which say that you can get discovery on something that might be relevant to the case at hand.
So again, before you sit down, I can understand the demand is not too indefinite, but the information being reasonably relevant, couldn't you remove that and just put relevant? I mean, it really should be relevant to the investigation.
This is something the city council can choose to word this how they want, as long as it meets the minimum requirements of the law, and I believe that that would be compliant with the law.
Okay. Before I make a motion, Councilor Sanchez?
Thank you, Madam President. My question is in regards to the current subpoena power. The board does have subpoena power if they go through the courts. Is that not correct?
Actually, it's not at all spelled out in the ordinance, and I'm looking for the particular provision. I don't know if Mr. Melendres has it memorized. It is just a simple statement in the current ordinance. So if you'll give me one moment, I will find it. Did you have another question while you?
Has the board ever gone to the courts to get a subpoena?
I would have to defer to Mr. Harness on that question.
And as you're making your way up, I just had one more question in terms of, in case of a refusal, they would take it to district court. Would the officer have any kind of representation paid for by the city of Albuquerque, or would he have to take on that by himself? Those two questions.
Madam President, so to address that question, I think what we're not talking about subpoenas to current officers themselves, because officers are required to comply with these investigations.
Right.
We're talking about witnesses who may have seen it. It could be a former officer.
Right.
So they would be provided notice and the opportunity to, if their compliance was sought, they could certainly hire their own counsel. I think that's spelled out in the amendments, and that would provide them with the adequate protections at their expense.
Okay, so that answers that. Mr. Harness.
Madam President, prior to the ordinance changes as adopted in February of 2014, the subpoenas were done by the Police Oversight Commission's policies and procedures, and they were not spelled out in the ordinance. Upon the change in the ordinance in February 2014, providing that subpoenas are available for the audit function, the board has not sought a subpoena for an audit to date.
Thank you.
Okay, with no other questions, I actually would like to make an amendment just to delete the word reasonably under number 3C, the information, so then it would read, the information is relevant to the purpose of the investigation.
Second.
There's a motion second to floor amendment number 11, which this would be actually number 3 to floor amendment number 11. All those in favor say yes?
Yes.
Opposed, no? So that's 2-7. Motion passes. So now we are back on floor amendment 11, amended 1, 2, and 3 times.
Madam President, I'm sorry. I did find the answer to what the current language in the ordinance is. It is, for purposes of its audit function, the POB shall have full access to investigation files and may subpoena such documents and witnesses as relevant to its audit function, and that's in section 9-4-1-4C3G.
Perfect. And it says relevant. It doesn't say reasonably relevant. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. Okay, so now we're back on floor amendment number 11 as amended. Any other questions? Nothing. So all those in favor say yes. Okay, probably I need a show of hands. All those in favor say yes, raise your hand. Oh. Of those opposed, no?
No?
So that passes on an 8-1. So now we are on floor amendment number 12. Councillor Benton.
Thank you, Madam President. Floor amendment number 12 reads as follows. Delete the following language on page 19, line 32 through page 20, line 1. A summary of these performance evaluations shall be delivered to the Chief of Police, Mayor, and President of the City Council for receipt by the Council. And the explanation is that this amendment originally proposed that actual performance evaluations be shared, but the POB suggested that they should probably only share a summary. The underlying purpose of this provision is to implement the CASA requirement that the CPOA and POB remain accountable to the mayor, city council, and APD. So I'm moving this for discussion.
There's a motion and a second on to floor amendment number 12. Any discussion, councilors? The administration? Okay, with that, Councilor Benton.
Move approval of floor amendment number 12.
All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion passes. We are now on floor amendment number 13. Councilor Benton.
Thank you, Madam President. Again, I'll move floor amendment number 13 for discussion purposes.
Second.
And this reads as follows. Insert the following on page 10, line 9, after the period. The City Council shall report out its progress on filling CPOA board vacancies on a quarterly basis. And this is recommending that our staff, this would not be ourselves personally, but that our staffs report out the progress of filling vacancies.
Okay, Councilor Benton.
And I do not support this amendment.
There's a motion and a second for floor amendment number 13. All those in favor say yes. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Now we are on floor amendment number. Oh, I'm sorry. All those in favor say yes to floor amendment number 13. Opposed? 7-2. Okay, that was weird, Councilor Benton. Floor amendment number 14, Councilor Gibson.
Thank you, Madam President. I won't be moving this amendment.
Floor amendment number 14, Councilor Sanchez.
Thank you, Madam President. This would be floor amendment number 14 to bill number committee substitute 2-0-18-23. And let me just begin by saying I discussed this in detail at the special meeting. Looking back at the FY16 budget, the APD operational budget was $158,203. Today in FY19, that budget is $188,856. We've had a substantial increase in the APD budget based on the special tax that was implemented, the 3/8 cents for public safety, which passed on an 8-1 vote by this council. You know, I believe that it's important that the board comes back every budget cycle, just like every other department, and comes in with a request and what their needs are. Looking back in the last 4 years, basically the CPOA budget has been in excess of the 0.5% that we have budgeted over the last 4 years. And if we look back on the historic CPOA budgeting, looking back to FY16, the approved budget was $1,005,000. They actually expended $877,450. There was a surplus of $127,550. And same occurred in FY17. There was a surplus of $232,277. And in FY18, there was a surplus of $127,056. All that money was reverted back into the general operating fund. It did not go back into public safety. You know, there's been a surplus looking historically at the last 3 years. You know, I think it's only fair that this department comes in and basically gives us a breakdown on what their needs are. You know, looking back historically and what we've done for this department, we've actually given them more money than what we've actually budgeted with the 0.5%. But I think it's only fair to the public, you know, and us as the board that sets the budget for the entire city, that we look at each and every department, whether it's internal ops, whether it's the audit department, if it's an enterprise fund, you know, all the different enterprise funds, the airport, they all come in and make the request for their budget. I think this should be no different, and I think we have provided the APOA and its board the independence that they need to operate. You know, we have worked very diligently in making sure that we provided them the independence that they are required to have. None of us have ever interfered in their work at all, and I think this will be a good thing for both the public, the taxpayers of this community, and this board.
Counselor Davis.
Madam President, and thank you, I appreciate that. I think that's well part, and I think you pointed out exactly what I was going to point out, so thank you. I think the 0.5% makes sense to me, but I think those above and beyond budgets have always been because we've gone above and beyond that 0.5%, and they haven't spent the extra that they requested. I think it's probably more prudent budgeting to stick with the 0.5% so that we have a baseline, and then as they move through the year and have extraordinary expenditures or a need because of caseloads or need some extra data, that they come back and make that articulation. And I still believe they should participate in the city's budget process to tell us how they're going to spend it. But I do think part of ensuring that they're independent is to guarantee a minimum amount of budget that we think is at least enough to staff an organization to receive complaints and investigate them. So I would oppose this on that ground and hope that we do smart budgeting in the future, and maybe we can make those adjustments in those requests.
Counselor Jones.
Thank you, Madam President. Counselor Davis, I would agree with you on the 0.5% if we weren't increasing the APD budget by so much that now we're increasing what 0.5% equals, and I think that's far too much without coming to us with a budget first. So I don't have a problem with a fixed percentage. I just think that the way we are this year going up a huge number with operating expenses for the APD, and I believe that will continue to be a trend in the future. I think 0.5% is far too much, so I'm much more comfortable with the budget this time, and perhaps when we get a grip on what our APD budget is in the next year or so, that we can go back to a percentage point.
Counselor Gibson.
Thank you, Madam President. I would agree with that as well. I don't think that there's any independence shown by basing the budget on a percentage of APD's budget. In fact, if anything, I think we could make a case for that going the opposite way, more dependence. But in any case, I think that there's a better way to approach this, and this would be by funding per case, at least getting a starting place for establishing a budget for the CPOA and POB. So I think in looking at cities that are somewhat similar to Albuquerque's with the cost of living, with cities particularly, definitely ones that have, you know, sort of gone down this road before with whatever their version of a CPOA and police oversight board might be, we can determine some kind of a ratio of, you know, what they spend in order to research cases and see them through closure. So actually, we do have, I have asked our city economist to look into this for us. So she hasn't, we haven't gotten back together, but I think that's a more, you know, certainly more logical approach in how we might budget for CPOA. Thank you.
Counselor Harris, then Counselor Jones.
Yes, I think what I was going to say has already been said, but I just don't like the notion that we can't trust ourselves to fund this agency appropriately based on their needs, and that we're going to somehow retaliate against them if they issue some opinions that we don't like. I mean, we all took an oath of office. We take it seriously, and I trust this body to be fair. We always have been, and we will continue to be.
Counselor Jones.
Thank you, Madam President, and I like Councilor Gibson's idea of doing it per case, but I don't think we can predict a year ahead of time how many cases they're going to have so that we'll know how much their budget should be. If we could predict that, it would be great, and I don't think we want to allocate the money after the fact. So I think we have to continue with a fixed number or a percentage based on something different. So I support this with the language taken out, equal to a minimum of 0.5%, and we will simply provide a budget or an amount, and we will look to Mr. Harness and his group to give us a budget and a request for the amount of money they would need.
Counselor Borrego.
Madam President, we don't look at any other budget in the city based on a 0.5% or a 0.25% or an 1/8%. We look at it based on their operating budget, how much they need to operate, based on their workload. And I think that, it's reasonable for us to look at this group, especially in light of their caseload may or may not increase. We don't know that yet. I mean, it depends. We have an idea, but we don't, based on all the new rules and everything that we just are adopting this evening, things, could change. I mean, and they could change for the better, for the worse, depending on our city as well as our growth. So I think that we should be looking at public budgeting in the same way that we look at all the other agencies that we deal with or departments that we deal with. And I mean, we should be looking at, line item budgeting, what are their needs, what do we need to provide as a council from kind of a policy perspective based on what their needs are. And so I think, and Councilor Gibson, I respect what you're saying about, how many cases do they have and so on. But every other department that we look at what are their needs and what are their personnel needs. And who knows, this agency may grow. They may need more staff down the line. So, I think that this bill that is being proposed here is pretty reasonable. But next year it may be something different. So I just wanted to say that.
Counselor Benton.
Yeah, I agree. Next year it could be something different, and the year after that could be something different. I'm also not completely convinced that this percentage of the APS budget, or APD budget, should be the way to calculate this. I'm not sure that budget equates to the kind of interactions between police and the public that would generate any specific number or a higher specific number because we're supporting APD fiscally in a better way than we have in the past. Does that mean there are going to be more cases? I don't see the correlation there. I am concerned about the percentage, but for the time being, I think the agency needs some predictability on what they can expect to budget. I heard Mr. Harness say that, I believe, compared to FY18, when there were 275 cases reviewed, that we're on track to be having maybe 400 this year if we were to continue on this basis. That would be a significant change. That would perhaps alter the math consistent with the additional funding that we're doing. It makes me wonder whether we shouldn't just have a floor of some kind, of figure, and based on these numbers that have been thrown out there in the somewhat over $1 million range, but not a whole lot more than that we perhaps look at just for now, and the council could come back and amend this as well, right? This is not an issue under the CASA, unless somebody were just saying we were being totally irresponsible. This is not an issue under the CASA, what we decide here. But I would be inclined, based on the numbers that we're hearing today, to suggest,
1.05 million, something like that, would be close to tracking numbers the way, based on the actual expenditures in past years, would come pretty close to that as a thought.
Counselor Jones and then Counselor Winter.
Thank you, Madam President.
Coun-
And Counselor,
Oh, it was Counselor Jones first.
Counselor Benton, I was thinking the same thing, and I understand how they feel about, making sure they have enough money, and so maybe there's a way we can work a baseline in this. So they have a baseline, and then if they feel they need more, then they come and ask for more, and it comes to the point where then we'll finally, the way things are going, a lot of this is new stuff, is that then we will really have a little more information about what kind of budget they need. So I think possibly if we could work a baseline in there, it might work, and then maybe everybody would feel good about it.
Counselor Jones.
Thank you, Madam President. I think that's what I'm kind of saying. I think the majority of the funding for this department is for staffing and overhead expenses. So why don't we ask them to give us a budget like we do every other department? We can decide if we want to go 10% over that budget or what we want to fund. If they need more money, they come back to us again, just like everybody else does. We do a cleanup from the other funding that we have money left over in. We add more to their budget. Rather than we give them more on this percentage basis or guess that they might need $1,200,000, and then we take it away from them when we do cleanup because we see they're not going to use it. Why don't we put that money to work and let our other departments have the money they need and take care of this at cleanup? I think we're kind of saying the same thing, but I believe that this department, like every other department, needs to present to us a budget. We want to know, they need to tell us what their staffing expenses are, what their now housing expenses are going to be if they move out of the chambers. Some of the things we've put off them, they're going to have to tell us what their budget is, and we try to work with it. I think that's fiscally responsible and probably what we should do with the tax money. Thank you.
Counselor Davis.
All right, this is going to take a minute. This discussion, maybe not my part. I agree, and I think we're all saying the same thing. I think the point of the 0.5% in the beginning was to create a baseline. There was never an expectation, and experience has shown us that we can go above that, and we have. That said, this is not like any other department. We're under our consent decree. This is a key component of showing our progress towards making constitutional policing a key part of how we do business. If by some chance this council chooses not to fund what some outside folks believe is an appropriate number, we put that agreement in jeopardy. And I think this is an important thing that we have to do in a $1 billion budget or a $500,000 budget, operating budget. I think the amount of money we're talking about here is insignificant compared to the obligation we have as a council and as a city to get this right. I think that's why we need a minimum. It shows that we're serious, and I think it avoids these budget conversations and complaints that we've had. I'm hearing more consensus of what I think is the baseline, whether it's 0.5% or whatever, and I think half is fine, around maybe one of the sponsors adding an amendment that says, that the CPOA shall present its board for approval to the city council like other departments, so that we can analyze how they have outlined their budget and be sure that we think it's appropriate. I think the minimum baseline is important. I think we should continue it. It gives us some certainty, but I'm certainly open to requiring them to submit a line item budget to the council for approval so that we can edit it appropriately if we need to.
Counselor Harris.
I was just going to suggest that we move I was going to call the question, but if we're ready to vote, let's just vote.
Yeah, I was headed to Counselor Sanchez to close.
Thank you, Madam President. And this amendment would not conflict with the CASA, which requires only that the city shall provide the agency a dedicated budget. So we are not in conflict with the settlement agreement at all if we come back and ask that the department present a budget before the council. And I urge your support.
With that, we have floor amendment number 14, a motion and a second to approve. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Oppose no. So there's a 6-3. Yes, raise your hand. No. 6-3, got it? Okay. So now we are on floor amendment number 15, Counselor Sanchez.
Thank you once again, Madam President. This is floor amendment number 15, and this amendment reads on page 18, line 13, add the following before the word city, and it would be at will. And basically, the explanation for this is the director will be an at-will employee, and will report directly to the board and no one else.
There's a motion, a second for floor amendment number 15. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Counselor Sanchez to close.
Urge support.
All those in favor of floor amendment number 15 say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion passes. We are done with all the amendments. We are back on the bill. Counselor Benton and Winter to close.
Well, this has been a long process, as we all know, and I think we've done a pretty good job. We're probably batting about 800 or something like that in some people's eyes, and maybe 90 in others, but I think we've moved the cause forward. I was on the short end of a couple of those votes just now, but I still think we've moved the ball forward in a good way, and I'm convinced of the support of this council and of this city for proper civilian oversight and constitutional policing, and I think together we can move forward and continue to improve quality. I mean, we have the ability to amend this. We have the ability to amend the idea that of whether or not we need a dedicated figure, and that may be something that we determine over the next couple of years through trial and error to a certain extent on the budget of the agency. So, but I do appreciate the work of Mr. Melendres and the legal department, and everyone who's been involved, APD Forward. We've had really good, frank discussions with everyone concerned, I think, and also appreciate my co-sponsor. This is his second go-round on this. This is only my first. He started out with Councilor Garduno, and I think got to a pretty good starting point that we're building upon, so I appreciate that as well.
Counselor Winter.
Thank you, Madam President. And was it 2012 that we redid the ordinance with Councilor Garduno? So, and it was interesting because it was an interesting time for the POB back in those days. And Councilor Garduno and I got together, and that was a great process we did. We got everybody involved. We got a committee together, and we really worked through the whole ordinance. And I thought it was great, and I thought we turned out with a good product. And then I remember they came to me for that we wanted to move 3 more amendments. One was a subpoena amendment, and I had a couple counselors come to me and says, well, look, we need to really revamp this whole ordinance. And I said, yes, we do. So we got to work and we did that. And I think this process was as good or better than the first time that we did it, with all the input we took and having people work together to create it. And I just very proud to even be part of this, and what the work council staff did, what the work of the city folks did, and what the counselors did all together to make it work. So proud to be part of this and just urge your support.
Thank you. Thank you to both the sponsors. And with that, there's a motion and a second for an approval of committee substitute, the second committee substitute as amended, 15 times and sub-amended. All those in favor say yes. Yes. Opposed, no. Motion passes unanimously. We are now on Councillor Jones, floor sub R120.
Thank you, Madam President. This is the floor substitute R19-120, approving the programming of funds and projects for the 2019-2028 decade plan for capital improvements, including the 2019 two-year capital budget. I would like to move approval of floor substitute number 2.
There's a motion and a second for approval. So before we move on to the amendments, I think we'll go to public comment. We have Chris Howd and Richard Martinez.
Madam President, honorable councilors, thank you for the opportunity to speak to the 2019 funding, the capital improvements. I'm here to request that you consider restoration of the funding, for the total funding for the Marble Arnold Drainage Pump Station to alleviate storm drainage in our historic neighborhoods. I'm primarily here to bring your attention to 13 proposed developments that depend upon adequate storm drainage infrastructure. These 13 proposed developments include the hotel under construction at Broadway and Central, Innovate Master Plan at Broadway, the Garcia developments along Commercial, the Titan Master Plan, which is across from Presbyterian, Oak Street, the I-25 Corridor Project, Tricor's future development, the Embassy Suites North Pad development, the UNMH Master Plan, which is 6 million square feet at a proposed cost of $2 billion, the Sandia Foundation Master Plan along Lomas, the West Corporation development, and additionally permitting another 20,000 square feet there on Broadway, the Heart Hospital, which has a possibility of adding a second story, Loveless, which we don't know what their proposed developments are, and the J.W. Winklejohn Mixed Martial Arts Academy. We're looking at 6.5 million square feet of development and 2.25 billion, that's with a B, of costs of development that would depend upon this critical infrastructure. And although I know everybody wants your money, or our money, and I really appreciate the hard work and the process that you go through. I've heard it tonight about weighing the different competing requests for the dollars that you have to allocate. And I thank you for the opportunity to speak. And I thank you for doing such a great job for our city. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. Oh, Councilor Beck.
Just quickly, just so you know, I think what's being addressed here is in the amendment that I have sponsored myself, having to do with the Marble Arno, and we heard also previously from the Innovate ABQ folks about how important this is to them. So thanks for coming down and sticking around with us.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Richard Martinez.
Thank you for this opportunity to address the council. I'm here also to ask if the full funding can be provided for this Arno Marble flood control. And just to give you kind of a sense of the history, I grew up in that neighborhood, and I've seen flooding there since the 1950s. Of course, it's gotten better over the years, but you know, it just depends if there's a flood, you know. As time has gone on, the city has done things to try to improve the flood control in the area, but there's been disasters and near disasters. It just, it's hard to predict. I think the project would provide for hopefully not having that sort of unpredictability, and disaster could happen tomorrow sort of a thing. So that's why I'm asking for, you know, your help in providing that full funding. It's been some time, and I guess, you know, we forget if a disaster doesn't happen, we just kind of forget about it, because, you know, it's not raining. Why fix the roof if it's not raining, right? But back in 2004 was the last time where we had some really large flood problems in that area. That was where we had these big sinkholes developed because of the flooding, and just averted disaster by luck, basically. Nobody fell in the holes, but it could have happened. So again, just asking if you can provide that help for our neighborhood. Not only our neighborhood, but other neighborhoods in that whole area, throughout that area. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So that was our last speaker. We are now on floor amendment number 1. Counselor Jones?
Madam President, I just want to check and see if there was a vote on the floor sub number 2 before we move on to amendments.
Okay. So I would ask your approval on floor substitute number 2.
There's a motion and a second for floor sub number 2. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion passes. So now we are back on
Amendments?
the amendments.
Yes, and Madam President, there's a packet in front of each of you with the floor substitute bill, and then a packet of amendments with a kind of subscribed order so that they fall correctly.
Councilor Borrego?
And there is an amendment in on your iPads that I have also provided, and I have only one copy.
Yes,
we'll
Madam,
go through them.
Madam President, that's included in the packet
Yeah.
in front of you.
It's all in the packet. Do you have?
Okay, I just was checking.
Okay, Counselor Jones, it's labeled A. It'll be floor amendment number 1.
Thank you, Madam President. This will be floor amendment number 1 to floor substitute 2. Adopted as hereby Exhibit A, a breakdown of the 2019 GEO bond program counselor set-asides. This is a standard procedure, is it not? Would you explain this to us, please, Ms. Yara, Director
Yes,
Yara?
Madam President, Counselor Jones, because these are counselor set-aside, it is up to each counselor to decide how they allocate their $1 million, and we usually effectuate that by an exhibit that CIP can use while they're preparing the plan.
And Ms. Yara, if I may, this is approved by the counselors in their districts, is that not correct? Thank you, ma'am.
Sorry, Counselor Harris?
Yeah, will there be some opportunity to change this through amendment later? Because I'm still not done analyzing what happened with the state legislature, and I think actually I would like, this is what I did last year, but this year's going to be very different.
Yes, Madam President, Counselor Harris, there is opportunity to change these allocations. We just need to make sure that's done before these questions go up to the voters.
Okay, so it could be an election resolution, or it could be some other, will there be other cleanup bills coming before the election resolution,
Yes.
or will it be election resolution?
Madam President, Counselor Harris, I am expecting both a CIP cleanup bill and an operating cleanup bill before that happens.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Counselor Jones?
Thank you. I would urge your support for floor amendment number 1.
There's a motion and a second for floor amendment number 1. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion passes. Now we are on floor amendment number 2, labeled B. Counselor Gibson and Jones.
Thank you, Councilor Gibson. Thank you, Madam President. This is, as it relates to the $14 million homeless facility. This is something that the voters are going to have to vote on, and we want to make sure that they understand that the City Council is 100% behind this project, but that we also want to make sure that the money, the $14 million, will be spent 100% on a homeless facility and what we think and the voters have thought we were going to do. Therefore, we would ask to insert the language, the scope of the project is expanded to require that prior to the expenditure of any of these programmed funds towards this project, the city council must first approve a project plan prepared by the city administration that identifies the key details of the project and how it features and programming present the most effective option for addressing the issues associated with and impacting the city's homeless population. I would like to move floor amendment number 2.
There's a motion and a second for floor amendment number 2. Councilor Davis.
Thank you, Madam President. And I just might ask really quickly, has it been our practice to insert this language into the bond initiatives or to do that through the appropriating legislation after, say, voters approve this in the past? Ms. Yara, could you help me with our process on this?
Madam President, Councilor Davis, in my experience, it's been done both ways historically. So I think it's up to the council how they would like to do that this year.
Thank you, Madam President. Ms. Yara, I just might note that I think the way it's written, and I do believe big projects like this, the master plan needs to come back to the city council, just like we did with the biopark. I think it's lessons learned from big construction projects in the past. But I do worry about the real narrow nature of saying any of these programmed funds toward this project that might limit the ability of anybody, the administration, to issue, say, contracts or anything else that might help us develop that plan. And so I think it might be too narrowly done, and I think it might be better considered on the appropriating side once we know that voters have approved this. But I certainly support bringing the master plan back to the council. I just think it could be better done there. I think it's a good idea.
Councilor Harris.
Yes, I think I agree with Councilor Davis. And particularly, one of the concerns I have is we're thinking about, I've had a lot of inquiries that people want to make this kind of not a national, but more of a regional kind of a project where you're going to have, the Congress, Deb Haaland, or maybe some of her staff, as well as Michelle Lujan Grisham, as well as some legislators in the county, and kind of get a task force together to kind of help us sort out the best practices. And I just think this is a little bit premature to be having this kind of directive language in the bond, CIP budget. I think it doesn't really belong here, although the concept of certainly the city council appropriates money and we should be involved. But in terms of this language, I'm not sure if I support it. And maybe at this point in time, we should hear from the administration, see what they think of all this, or this particular amendment, I should say.
Madam President, and members of the council, Councilor Harris, thank you for the opportunity. We wholeheartedly support both yours and Councilor Davis's perspective. The council has numerous opportunities to review this project through the course of, once the voters make the determination that if they do support this project, to come back and have the conversation. Not only do we have to come back to the council for contract approval, for architect's approval, and quite frankly, even as Councilor Davis indicated, even in the appropriation side of the process, once the voters approve this, we have to come to the council with the bill to appropriate the actual dollars into all of the projects that are part of the decade plan. So we would respectfully request that we don't have this amendment at this point. Let us have a conversation, because the language is so narrow that we wouldn't even be able to hire experts or talk to folks about how to develop the plan to get this done. So it is premature as far as we're concerned, and we would like to not have the amendment as part of this bill. There'll be plenty of other opportunities during the course of the conversation of this, citing this facility and building it, where the council will have an opportunity to review a master plan and have a conversation about how this process should go forward.
Councilor Gibson, followed by Councilor Borrego, and then Councilor Sanchez.
Thank you, Madam President. So, I haven't seen anything. I don't even know if there's anything out there, any kind of a design or even a narrative on this. It's been, sort of nebulous out there. But, I would be okay with loosening the language a little bit, but I don't think it's for a $14 million project, starting $14 million project, I don't think it's out of line to have an expectation that council will be updated on this project as that money get spent. And so that's what I think, that's what my intention is with this. So, you know, I mean, if we want to soften the language a little bit, I would be okay with that. But I think this is a good amendment to the CIP budget, and you know, particularly since, you know, we really haven't seen anything.
Mr. President and Councilor Gibson, you know, the whole idea here is that this goes to the voters for their approval. And again, as I said before, we have plenty of opportunity to review that. If the council wants to give a sense of the council that the administration shall come with a plan, you know, once we have some opportunity to hire the right folks to look at the, you know, we need to maybe get some consultants, some architects, some design. We can do that as part of the appropriating process, and you will have that information available to you to make this determination. We can't spend any of this money anyway until you appropriate it. So it just seems that to me that that's the logical place to put these requirements, not in a bill that goes to the vote or in a capital program that goes to the voters, where they're not going to see all this detail. They're going to see just the broad categories. And so from that perspective, I don't think the council loses any authority over it, and it certainly gives us the flexibility to present a real comprehensive plan for you during the appropriating process.
Thank you. Councilor Borrego.
I just wanted to express sort of a caution. You know, I'm probably one of the counselors that's worked the most with a lot of the homeless issues, besides probably Councilor Benton, when I worked in city planning. And so I'm probably overly sensitive to, you know, their plight. But one of the issues that has sort of been raised to me recently, and I think that it's sort of a word of caution for all of us, is the fact that homeless populations from other states are being transported to Albuquerque and to New Mexico because of our weather. And, you know, I just think that we need to be careful about how we approach the homeless issue, and maybe even looking at a task force in the future to try to start looking at these issues in depth. But I think just the fact that there are homeless populations that are being sent to New Mexico, especially as the weather starts getting warmer, and you know, our populations increase for that reason. So I think that you know, it's really important and imperative that we don't create a situation where, you know, we keep addressing and expanding the needs, which is appropriate, but not to the point where we're taking in the U.S. population of homeless. So I just wanted to express that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Sanchez.
Thank you. I think we must respect the will of the voters, which they will be voting on this $14 million appropriation. I will not support this amendment. When the Paseo del Norte project was passed, that was a $50 million appropriation. It didn't have any specific language in it prior to us doing the work. That did come back before the council. And I believe that the administration, I mean, the number one priority of this administration and this council is public safety and also dealing with the homeless population. We've got some serious challenges, and when I talk to the constituents from my community and throughout the district, they're very concerned about the issue. So let's hope the will of the voters first vote for the initiative and support the $14 million appropriation for the facility, and then we can start working on the actual facility and getting that built for this community.
Councilor Harris.
And if I'm not mistaken, the vote's going to happen in November, and then the earliest we could sell the bonds would be what, Ms. Yara? What? April? So we're talking 13 months from now. We don't need this language now. We have lots of time to narrow and work with the administration and work with maybe even other bodies to figure out you know, the best way to spend this money, to appropriate this money, and to put controls on it, which we should.
Okay, Councilor Gibson and Jones to close.
Okay, so we haven't seen a project plan. And so this is very much unlike the Paseo project. I remember coming here that night, and there was a beautiful 3D model out in the hallway there. Yes, absolutely. I'm glad that we are taking a positive, meaningful step forward to, to work on solutions for the huge problems that we have. However, I feel pretty much like we're being asked to write a $14 million check with no knowledge, no briefing, no details about this whatsoever. So, I would be willing to, like I said, soften the language a little bit, but I would like to see an approved project plan. And somebody mentioned that this goes before the voters. That's for good reason. So we don't just, ask for money that might not be used well. So if anything, I think that's more evidence for having expectations of how we are updated as this moves along.
So I already sent it to close, and we have Councillor Benton and Winter who wanted to comment. So what do those sponsors? Okay. Benton.
Yeah, I mostly wanted to ask, would this language appear before the voters on the ballot?
Madam President, Councillor Benton, I don't believe this language would appear before the voters. All of the projects are lumped into purpose categories, and that's really what the voters see. So I'm assuming this item would be lumped into the community facilities question if it goes the way it usually does. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Ryle, I kind of understand what the council's doing. So tell us what you would do. How would you do this to give us some, confidence?
Madam President and Councilor Winter, first and foremost, we've been talking about this with the community members for some time. We have an advisory committee that is made up of all of the appropriate stakeholders in the community that have been working on this project. We have been working with the county. We already have a track record of what this might look like. We're running an interim facility on the west side that is wholly inadequate and doesn't have all of the additional services that we would like. And so we're paying a lot of money to have that facility that far away from the city. So I would tell you that this project is going to be continue to be we're going to work with the university. We're going to work with the county. Like I said, we have an advisory group that's giving us information about the project. But more importantly, I would just say to you, Councilor, look, there are lots of projects in the CIP that we don't have details on. If we want to go down that road on every one of these projects. What we're basically asking the voters is that these are the greater needs of the community, and we have a process by which we have community involvement and community outreach on all of these. And so this project itself is going to have a lot of scrutiny in and of itself. And so I would say to you that, look, we have plenty of opportunity after the voters make the determination on all of these projects to have the oversight and the appropriate level of review that you all have as your positions and as councilors. And we just want to make sure that we don't tie our hands before we even get the project started.
Madam President, one more question. So you're not, basically, there's not going to be any money spent on plans or anything until that $14 million is approved, if it's approved by the voters?
At this point, Madam President and Councilor Winter, we can't spend any money until you all appropriate it for this project. That's sort of my point. So if we spend any money on designing this project, et cetera, it may be from the state capital funds that you all would appropriate anyway in the cleanup, or money you would appropriate in the budget if you want to do this project. So The point is that we're not going to spend any money until the council appropriates the funds. And that can either happen during this budget process or in the cleanup or when the voters approve this.
Madam President, so Mr. Rao, that means that then you're going to have a plan? If this mini is approved, then you're going to have a plan?
Madam President and Councilor Winter, we will need to have a plan before we spend these dollars.
Thank you, Councilor Jones.
Does anyone else want to talk before
I think we covered everyone.
Okay. First of all, it's we, the council, that are putting our necks out on asking for this. We were told by the administration, #1 priority was homelessness, taking care of the homeless. We made all kinds of sacrifices, moved money around in order to provide what we were told was needed for the homeless, the first part of the homeless facility. We know this isn't the end of it. We know we're going to have to keep spending, but we were asked, and we did. We sacrificed from our districts. We did as much as we could to provide the $14 million. I have a real problem personally, because I plan to go out and talk to the voters about why we support this and why this is in there. First of all, I have a real problem with it is if it is not an individual item on the ballot, not lumped in with all of the others, but it needs to be specifically this project and then the others. And I have a real problem if you say to me you're not going to spend any money until we appropriate it, then why do you have a problem telling us what you're going to appropriate and for what use before you spend it? I mean, we will have appropriated, we will have helped the city get $14 million for homeless facility. That's huge. That's a big amount of money for us in our budget, but it's absolutely essential. One of our #1 issues in the city. I don't understand how you are reluctant or concerned or don't want to tell us what it's going to be spent on. We all understand paying for consultants. We all understand paying an architect for preliminary design. We all understand this, but as you said, you are working with other entities to make this happen. I'm sure they have to get approval from someone to spend the money. I see no problem with our representing the taxpayers wisely and also knowing what the money is being spent on. So I have a difficult time with your explanation of why you don't want us to know what's going to be spent before it is spent. Thank you. But I do like this project, and I think it's essential for the city of Albuquerque, which is why it is in the budget and all the councilors agreed to it. Thank you.
Okay, so is that the close? I think Councilor Gibson's closed. Yes? Okay. There's a motion and a second for floor amendment #2. All those in favor, raise your hand.
#2.
#2.
To include excluding Amendment B. This is floor amendment #2. The whole thing is floor amendment #2. And so we're going to take out, they're saying this is for #2 that we're voting on right here, right now. Okay, all right. Floor sub 2. Okay, I'm with you. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah.
We're voting on yes or no to leave.
We were, yeah, I was, yes.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, it's floor amendment #2.
On floor substitute.
So all those in favor of floor amendment #2, raise your hand. Opposed? Raise your hand. So we are now on,
And the vote was?
oh, the vote was 5-4? 4-5? So now we are on item, I'm going to skip C. We are on item D. This is Councilor Borrego.
Yes, I'm sorry, Madam President. Councilor Borrego's Amendment D is contingent on your Amendment C because it contains the same movement of funds. So I would prefer that your amendment go first. Otherwise, I'll need to amend your amendment.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to move my amendment, so Councilor Borrego. No, you're good.
So,
your amendment.
so I will move my amendment?
Yes.
And if you move your amendment, it will include my amendment?
Yeah, you're good to go on your amendment.
Madam President, there are two other sponsors on floor amendment number 3. Yourself, Counselor Davis, and Counselor Ben. We'd like to hear from the other two sponsors.
I would defer to Counselor Pena.
Counselor Benton?
I guess I don't see the difference if this is useful to have.
Madam President, I can amend the amendment as needed as they move along. So whatever is the will of the council, go for it.
Okay, so then it would just, hers would be just null and void and it would fall into, okay. Counselor Borrego?
Okay, thank you. So I guess my amendment would be floor amendment number 3? Is that correct?
It'd actually be floor amendment number 3, and I guess
Yeah.
it's in our
Number 3.
iPads?
And it should be in your iPads, but let me read it to you.
Yes, it's, I'm sorry, Madam President, this is item D in your packet?
Yes, that's what I said, item D. And so it would be floor amendment number 3, but it is in your packet,
It's in your iPad.
in your
actually.
iPad, I'm sorry. There's
So,
not in our packet.
Let me just read it. So number 1, on page 5, line 29, entitled Affordable Housing, decrease the amount by 500,000. Number 2, on page 6, line 7, entitled Cibola Loop Community Center, increase the amount by 500,000. This amendment reduces the allocation for affordable housing projects from 500,000 from 5 million to 4.5 million, and increases the Cibola Loop Community Center project from 1 million to 1.5 million. And they didn't add this in the explanation, but the Cibola Loop project contains an affordable housing project.
Second. So there's a motion and a second for floor amendment number 3. Any discussion? Counselor Benton?
So I'd like to ask Councilor Borrego, so the Cibola Loop project includes an affordable housing project and also a library and also a community center.
That's a multi-generational center, a library, and an affordable housing, senior housing
Right.
project.
So, so there was already $1 million, this would bring it up to 1.5 million
Correct.
total.
Yes.
And it would be coming out of affordable housing. I guess I'm just asking the question on this. I know that this project has been in the works before your time, and that it's already been established as a goal of the cities. I just, was wondering where we are with this. Are we in the design phase? Is it being designed?
The I'm sorry. The affordable housing portion of it is in RFP, and I haven't seen the first RFP yet. We are awaiting that. And you can correct me if I'm wrong from the administration. The multi-generational center, we requested money for design from the state capital outlay, and we will know that on Friday. But it looks like we're at least getting the design portion of that, and that would include the library.
Okay, so.
So I think we're at about almost 2 million, 1.5, almost $2 million for the design is what we're anticipating.
Of the design cost?
Mhm.
Okay.
Any questions?
Yeah, I mean, I just have to say, when I say affordable housing being cut, I do get concerned. I know that there's about 2.4 unspent in there now. So I don't know what the capacity or what's on the horizon as far as people coming forward with these projects. But I do think it's important to point out to the councilors that the Workforce Housing Trust Fund, which is what this fund is, that this would be removed from, those funds typically are leveraged for low-income housing tax credits to build these types of projects. So I would assume that's going to be the case here. I just didn't know what the difference would be if we've got a priority out here already for Cibola Loop.
would that somehow compromise that process if it's not part of the Workforce Housing Trust Fund?
Well, two things. One thing, Councilor Benton, is I would remind you that we don't have any affordable housing in my district, so this is really creating that initiative. And secondly, until I see the RFP, I'm not completely certain how this would be used, but it would help leverage some of probably the construction for this project.
Thank you. Councilor Sanchez.
Thank you, Madam President. With the growth on Albuquerque's west side, I know that we have Nuevo Atrisco going in, which is going to be affordable housing, but I know there's a dire need also in Councilor Borrego's district for affordable housing. And once again, whether the funds are leveraged in Council District 1 or Councilor Benton in your district, they will be used the same way, where we are leveraging those resources and those dollars, where we're maybe leveraging 5 to 1, and it's going to be a benefit to the area and to the community.
Yeah, and Madam President, if I could just respond, I didn't mean to suggest that this should be in any place at all other than the fund, which is used all over the city, so thank you.
Okay, well, with that, any more discussion? Administration, there's a motion and a second for floor amendment number 3. All those in favor say yes? Yes. Opposed, no? No. All those in favor of floor amendment number 3, please raise your hand. Opposed? No? That fails on a 5 to 4. So then we have,
Chair, may I just say something? Thank you. I just would like to remind the council that I gave up $1 million for the library. So I'm actually, by not having this amendment approved, I've lost $1 million from this budget.
Councilor Harris?
And I just, things are kind of swirling, and sometimes we don't really get a chance to do the full analysis up here, and we're going to have some cleanup legislation. You're only one vote short. Don't give up hope. We can talk, continue to talk.
So now we are on Councilor Benton, number E in your packet, and it would be floor amendment number 4.
Yes, and Madam President, we just handed
3.
out.
Sorry.
Yeah, we handed out a revised amendment that changed slightly what was in your packet. So it was the one-off that Ms. Hinojos handed out just now. Yes.
Thank you, Madam President.
So Councilor Benton.
Thank you, Madam President. So just to clarify, these are two, my original bill was, or my original amendment was one way of getting to the same place that we've got on the one that was handed out. The first one, this is about the Marble Arno Station. Let me just give you the background on that. And I was at the board meeting of MAFCA on Thursday, pointed out to MAFCA that we had increased our funding for the project from $2 million to $3.5 million. Situation right now is that MAFCA has a commitment, or has had a commitment of $6 million in this project for the last several years. The board, the MAFCA board, had a discussion. I don't know the details of that discussion. Perhaps Councilor Borrego could fill us in. But the takeaway is that they feel that the city has been moving much too slowly. This project's been in the works since the floods that were mentioned by the neighborhood folks who spoke in 2006. At that time, the city and MAFCA partnered on a temporary pond at the corner of Broadway and Lomas, and there are approximately $6 million of MAFCA, or exactly $6 million of MAFCA money towards a new pump station that would eliminate that temporary pond and provide a permanent facility for this deficiency. The board, I made my presentation, and the board had a discussion about how slowly the city has moved towards funding the project. So AMAFCA has had this $6 million in the project for the last 5 years or more, I believe, Councilor Borrego, if I'm not mistaken. Those funds are now under threat. I've been told that the AMAFCA is moving to repurpose its $6 million pledge to the project if we can't accelerate it some on the city side. This would add $2 million to the existing 3.25 that we've got in the budget, and it would do it. I was originally looking at police vehicles, but this version would do it using the line item, just as a reservation within the line item of general flood drainage. So I'll just read the amendment.
Madam President and Councilor Benton, I just want to note that the city attorney has suggested that you move to suspend the rules because this amendment wasn't on the dais when the meeting started. So.
Was that on the dais? Okay. All right, well then, I'll move to suspend the rules to hear the bill.
There's a motion and a second to suspend the rules to hear what potentially is item F and potentially floor amendment number 3. Wouldn't it be, oh, because Borrego's, since it failed, it still was 3. Okay, so amendment number 4. All those in favor say yes and raise your hand.
Yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no? So it's 3-6. 6-3, sorry. So passes, Councilor Benton.
Thank you. So the change to the amendment, and again, this is not a significant change.
Excuse me,
because
Councilor
it's-
Benton, 1 second. Do
Pardon
you
me?
have the amendment?
Council President Pena, no, we do not.
Are there any additional copies?
Madam President, the amendment, let me finish my introduction of the issue. We're facing a $6 million reduction in a project from our partner that has been our partner in this from years ago. Madam President, I'll wait until my fellow councilors can hear my explanation.
Excuse me, Councilor Benton.
I'd like to be heard, please. The courtesy. $6 million, if I could reiterate the issue at hand, would be removed from this project that's been in the works for 8 years by the AMAFCA board. They're pretty much saying we're tired of waiting. The city needs to accelerate the project in some way. We're not even presently matched with them. This would provide enough money to build the project. There might be a slight delta that would still have to be dealt with, but at the same time, we own the property jointly with them at the corner of Broadway and Central, or Broadway and Lomas, and that property was appraised at $2.2 million. So that's not part of the equation right now. That property was appraised at $2.2 million with a floodplain. In other words, it's within a floodplain. After the project is built, it would no longer be within the floodplain. So our ownership, which is split between us and AMAFCA on that project, would the value of it would increase and should be able to cover the delta. But this $2 million, I've been told by the board, would be an important move forward where they could actually feel like we're still
intending to get it built, and not just now, but not just in another 2 bond cycles, which is where we had it, but getting it built now. So I think that's really important to point out. Also, as was pointed out by the speakers, the amount of development that's going on in that area that needs to be taken out of that same floodplain is tremendous. And so this would not take from police vehicles, which we were trying to avoid doing, and that's why we have a different amendment here. But it does take from 2nd Street, which is a project that was listed for my district, although it's an important corridor to get to the rail yards, and that is part of what we're taking out for the time being, and try to find that elsewhere in the future. That's how important it is. And then the other 1 million is within the total DMD storm drainage.
Councilor Sanchez.
Thank you. Councilor Benton, regarding that issue, I know you were at the AMAFCA meeting last week. Did they confirm that they were going to take the money, or they were going to take the money if we did not provide the funding?
Madam Chair, Madam President, may I speak, please?
Oh, hold on one second. Councilor Sanchez had a question.
Well, that question can be directed to the AMAFCA board member.
Okay, so the Marble Arno project, AMAFCA has dedicated $8 million, and there's a shortage of about $5 million. And so at our meeting, we basically directed, that we need to find, the city needs to find the $5 million to complete the project, or they will reappropriate the $8 million to a different project. And so that's where I think Councilor Benton is trying to make up that difference of $5 million. The issue with Marble Arno drainage is that it controls much of the downtown drainage. It controls drainage all the way to the railroad, to the zoo, most of the downtown, and Martinez Town. So it's a high priority. The problem is, where does that $5 million come up with? And I guess that's what this amendment is that Councilor Benton is proposing here. The only question that I have, Councilor, is are these the appropriate categories to take this funding from?
Councilor Sanchez had the floor, so Councilor Sanchez.
Thank you. I think you do clarify that issue, and I think it's important that the AMAFCA has $8 million. We need to find a way to leverage the $5 million to meet that need. I know that Councilor Ben has been working on this for many, many years, and I know AMAFCA has had that money sitting there for such a long time. And if we still have the opportunity, if that money has not been appropriated to another source, then I think we need to work making sure that we can appropriate the additional $5 million.
Madam.
And I'm glad to see that it's not the previous amendment that was taking the $1 million away from police vehicles.
Councilor Benton.
And believe me, I didn't even suggest that lightly, only knowing that I know we're going to have a commitment to police vehicles in the operating budget. But I understand that, and I think this is more appropriate. As important as I think 2nd Street, going down to the rail yards, is going to be eventually, I think we can figure that out later. And so I was willing to pull that out. And I think this storm drainage category is already being, I think, used. Councilor Sanchez, you have some dedicated project within that, as does Councilor Gibson. So I think we can still continue to work with that as needed and rebuild that as needed. But this is an immediate, as was described by the board chair, an immediate deficiency and a latent deficiency. It's been there for a long time, and if we have another storm like we had, 2 storms in 2 weeks in 2006, we could be back to where we were, or worse, depending on how the storms materialize in the future. But it is a liability for the city. It's certainly a threat to the existing development in downtown Broadway, as was described by Councilor Borrego, all the way down, some ways down, and all the way up to Mountain Road. And then the investments that are being made and the plans that are being made within Innovate ABQ and the Garcia family in that immediate area as well. Our infrastructure is part of our economic development. Without storm drain infrastructure, that's the most basic infrastructure we could talk about. So I urge your support.
Councillor Harris.
Thank you. And I'm just, this may or may not be true. I just know how many millions of dollars have gone into that area in this budget cycle. It's mind-numbing as it is. But what I really don't like is a $2 million being plopped on us after 5 o'clock. So that's why I'm opposed to it.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
This is a $2 million amendment that's dropped on us after 5 o'clock on the final.
Well,
So I
point
don't-
of order, the amendment was in the bill book for $2 million on Friday. 5 of the 7 provisions that were in the bill that was available to you on Friday are still in this exact same version. So this is not a substantial change from what was proposed on Friday. The source was changed for half of the money.
And so really, I'd like to hear what the administration thinks of this. And I think it is a substantial change if it was an amendment that had no chance of passing, but now you're changing it at the last minute. But maybe the administration supports it, I don't know.
Madam President and Councillor Harris, Councillor Benton did talk to us about this amendment, and early on, we did propose a conversation with him about that we felt that it was, if he moved money from his own, if you will, projects, in this case, the Second Street project, that would be the $1 million that at least would move in the right direction with hopefully showing a MAFCA that we are trying to get the dollars. My only concern is that in this particular one, there is also a decrease in DMD. If I'm not mistaken, Councillor Benton, the other $1 million comes out of, is it coming out of the DMD storm drainage program or out of their street program? Out of the storm drainage program, which interestingly enough would probably be where we would get the money if we absolutely had to meet a commitment with the MAFCA anyway, because the category is broad enough to do that. So in some ways, this obviously would be one and the same, although there may be other storm drainage projects that will get impacted if this $1 million comes out of that, because now this money will be dedicated to this project. And so it's really an issue that we would prefer not to have it come out of there, but because it does hurt other projects that may be in need of some funding as well. And just for the record, Madam President and members of the council, I did have a conversation with Mr. Lovato on Friday afternoon and did say to him that at least if we had at least the $1 million commitment that was, again, Councilor Benton's money from Second Street, would that suffice in at least showing a MAFCA that we're trying to get there? There is a little bit of this disconnect between the number that a MAFCA has for the project and what our folks in DMD believe is the total amount. A MAFCA, I think, believes it's somewhere between 17 and 18 million. DMD thinks it's somewhere between 13 and 14 million. So there's a disconnect. So again, I think even the $1 million would be appropriate from Second Street. That I think would meet at least the commitment, and there may be some opportunity for us to negotiate with MAFCA. One of the proposals we had made during the administration's first take at this was that we would use the property at Lomas and Broadway as a future commitment if we sold that land to, again, to reimburse MAFCA for their dollars. So there was conversations about give and take about this in this project.
Any other questions? Councillor Jones.
Thank you. Not a question necessarily, but certainly a statement. You know, sometimes we get caught up in the sexy things that we think are fun and we'd like to see people have built. We think that people would like to see built. We put money in parks that we know that we're not going to do anything with them for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. But people want them. We put money in community centers that we know that there won't be any money to finish them for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, but that's okay. And yet we have a project like this where neighborhoods, it's proven, major neighborhoods in this area let's see, Central to Harris, Martinez Town, Huning Highlands, South Broadway, San Jose, Barela, South Martinez Town are flooded consistently when we have a big rain in the city. How can we overlook a project like this that we know has to be done? We have an obligation to do it. It's not pretty. It's not sexy. Nobody's going to say, oh my gosh, yeah, I really hope that we have another $2 million to fill in that hole and take care of the drainage. But we have to do it. This is where we make the hard decisions. I am supportive of this 100%, Councilor Benton, and thank you for stepping out there and putting your neck out to do something that's right.
Councilor Borrego.
I'm going to support this because I know that the flooding has been a problem for many, many years, and this just didn't start in the last year or 2 or 5. So, you know, I think, you know, Councilor Benton has made an honest, has taken an honest look at where money should come from. I would have preferred if it would have come from the rail yard, because I don't believe that, you know, we can tear up the rail yard and start looking at mitigation of all of the problems that we have down there with regard to pollution and without doing this, because it will create severe problems if we start, you know, doing remediation and the drainage issues have not been dealt with. So I think from that perspective, it's imperative that we start looking at this particular project as a high priority. And I am going to support this, Councilor Benton, even though you didn't support affordable housing in my district.
I just want to ask administration, Mr. Rael, if we take money from the DMD streets total, how will that impact other projects?
Madam President, and let me have Mr. Montoya come up and talk to you a little bit about what the projects that they had identified with the use of that money.
And as you're making your way up, I just want to say that, I absolutely support the decrease from Second Street, because it's actually out of Councilor Benton's district. And as Councilor Harris stated, Councilor Benton, there's just a lot of dollars going to downtown, which is much needed. But I just get concerned when we have all these kind of dedication of dollars throughout the capital bill, that it impacts us all. And if it's just going to a specific district, it makes it challenging for us to get our projects done. So, Mr. Montoya.
Madam President, so let me address your first question. So if I look at Councilor Benton's amendment, it's actually taking $1 million out of the Second Street project and moving it into the project itself. So the impact would be, we would have to find additional funding source for Second Street to make whatever improvements we had intended to make from Gold down to Hazeldean. So that would be the impact. So it's either we don't do it now, or we would have to put it out for another couple of years and then do that project then. So that's the major impact immediately to Second Street. Based on what I'm reading, he's not taking it out of any other street projects. But if the question is open, if you were to change it to other street projects, we would have to adjust our schedule and adjust our projects to look at those that we are either close to having fully funded or are in full design. Those would be the projects that we would move to the table first. And then anything after that would have to be pushed out a couple of years. But the way the legislation reads now, the amendment, that's the only project that's impacted from what I can understand.
So it was my understanding that it was from streets as well. So is that accurate, Councilor Benton?
Well, if you read this, the streets are the same figure of Second Street plus the trails and bikeways at $50,000. So the $1,050,000, it comes from a total street. When you do this, you have to adjust each of the totals as well as the individual line items. So that's the point.
But Madam President, if I read it correctly, it's entitled Second Street. So it's coming from the Second Street project.
Could you also look at line item 7, please?
So the other project is designated, as Mr. Ryle described, Madam President, from storm drainage. So this is a category that's appropriate to this storm drain project.
Yes, Madam
So-
President, I just want to clarify that the items 6 through 8 relate to the subtotals in the back of the bill. They're not additional deappropriations.
So just for clarification, it is the $1 million just from his Second Street projects. It's not an additional million. Okay, that's where my concern lied.
And Madam President, that's the way I understood the question from.
Okay, that's where my concern was.
Madam President, if I might,
Mr. Rea.
and Councilor Benton, just so that, I think you and I are both on the same page, but I want to make sure that the rest of the council, Second Street's clear, that's coming out of there. The additional $1 million is coming out of storm drainage program in DMD.
Correct.
And so that is money that would otherwise be available for other storm drainage programs within the city if the money would not be earmarked for this specific project. Now, the same is true that if you all made the decision that you wanted to move $1 million from this project, from storm drainage piece to put into this project, you could do that as well. So it's one and the same, but that does have impact on any other storm drainage projects anywhere else in the city, because it decreases that amount available from that general purpose category. Does that make sense?
So then it does add the 2 million, or am I just more confused?
It adds another $1 million to the.
It adds another $1 million.
To the project.
And I know we're working on the 86th and Sapphire drainage because I have some of the similar issues on the Southwest Mesa. So I will go to Councilor Jones and then Councilor Harris.
Thank you, Madam President. And Mr. Rael, perhaps you can explain this to me. The budget that the administration presented to the council only had $800,000 in drainage. When we redid and the council did our version of the budget, we put, $4 million in drainage. So I think probably the council is a bit more concerned about drainage than the administration was. So I'm not comfortable thinking that you would now say that this $1 million that was never in drainage is now a problem, that we keep it in drainage, but put it in drainage that wasn't even specified. The city administration put in $800,000 for drainage. Our budget raised that to $4 million. So there's a disconnect here in my brain.
Madam President and Councilor Jones, I'm not saying it's a problem. I'm just pointing out to the council, the question that was asked was, does this money impact other projects? And when you take $1 million from that category that would otherwise be available for other projects to dedicate it to this one project, the answer is yes. It's not a problem, just simply clarifying the question that was asked.
And if I may, Madam President, but the $3.2 million that we still have in excess of what you put in, probably, the administration put in, probably kind of negates that issue. I would think, if my math works, we have a lot more numbers in there now than we did when it started. Thank you.
Mr. Montoya, did you want to add anything?
Well, I just wanted to clarify. So I think the question you were asking is what other projects might be impacted, because we're now dropping it from the $4 million to $3 million. So potential projects that could be dropped that we'd have to push out a couple of years. Gibson-San Mateo floodplain is one that is on the horizon. University Boulevard, Candelaria. So the answer to your question is we can move with the $3 million. It's just a couple of our projects would have to be pushed out.
President,
Okay.
Madam President, may I
Hold on. It was Councilor Harris.
That's okay. That was a question I wanted to answer, essentially
Then Councilor
what's the
Gibson,
actual effect?
and then Jones.
Madam President, can we move to suspend the rules to keep the meeting going past 10:30 before you guys?
Second.
So motion and second to suspend the rules to go till
10:45?
10:45. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. I was waiting for you, Councilor Winter. So, Councilor Gibson.
Thank you, Madam President. So those other projects that you're mentioning just a moment ago, sir, Do we have, are we expecting other partners out there to chip in? That's just what the city is doing, those other projects?
Madam President, Councilor Gibson, so on the list that we have here, the ones that we've identified, there is either a contribution from AMAFCA at this point, or we don't have all of the funding from the capital program. So we would have used whatever we got in order to fully
Right.
fund these projects. So there are partners in a couple of these projects, but
Good.
not in all of the projects.
Okay. So it seems to me that, you know, we have $8 million, some $8 million, some number that nobody's really quite sure of right now. That, are we sure of the 8 million? Okay, the $8 million that's on the line that AMAFCA is threatening to pull back, it sounds like to me. Well, I guess it depends on, you know, where your perspective is in all of that. So, you know, this just seems like, you know, a plain good deal. I mean, let's figure this out and get this project funded. You know, I have long time flooding in my district too, that I really want to repair in the next year or two. But, you know, I am fully supportive of this, and I just think that we need to get it done. Let's get the last few million of this together and get it done. Thank you.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Madam President. And Director Montoya, I'm embarrassed to point this out to you, but none of those projects that you just mentioned were even in the administration's proposed budget. So obviously, they weren't that important a few months ago as they are now. This is not going to harm what the administration had planned. You will still have several million more in there than what you asked for. And with that, I would like to call the question on this.
Yeah. There's a motion and a second.
Madam President, I just have to make a correction. I'm sorry for the interruption.
Yep.
So on lines 5 and 6 of this amendment, the total amount should read $1,050,000, not $2,050,000.
That's on line 5. 5 and 6.
So I make a motion,
Yeah, so well, no. Do we have to
Second.
amend it? We do. There's a motion and a second to amend it, line 5 to the correct number of 1,050,000.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion passes. We're back on floor amendment 4 as amended. And the question's been called. There's a motion and a second, but I just want to, for clarity purposes, just real quickly, AMAFCA said 8 million. You said the 1 million additional would show good faith. And how much is the total project?
Well, Madam President, and that's a bit of a debate between the city. Mr. Montoya indicated to me that we thought that we could do this project for about 14 to 15 million. AMAFCA feels it's somewhere between 17 and 18 million, if I'm not mistaken.
So we're nowhere getting close to getting this done, and if we do the 1 million, it shows good faith, you're saying?
And when I talked to Mr. Lovato of AMAFCA, he did say that if we put at least $1 million, that he would personally urge the board not to abandon the project and to move forward with a commitment that the city would find.
Point of order, we called the question.
So, well, then there's a motion and a second for floor amendment number 4 as amended. All those in favor say yes and raise your hand.
Yes.
Opposed, no.
No.
No. So that's a 7-2. So then we are on item F, which is floor amendment number 5. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Madam President. Let me turn to that. I think it's in the, is this, oh, it's on the iPad only? Gosh darn it. Is it?
Your mic needs to be on, Councillor.
Okay, yeah, I have it. Let's see, where's,
Yeah, so, Madam President, Councillor Harris,
by me?
you would want to move item G.
Yeah, but it's not in my packet. It's not in
And
front
there
of me.
should be a packet in front of you of hard copies.
It's blank. It's item G.
Yeah.
Item G, yes, I'm sorry.
There's item G is me, and then there's item, okay, that's fine. Okay, item G will work then.
And that would be floor amendment number 5.
And this was, and so the amendment already passed that put extra money for lighting? Okay.
Madam President, Councilor Harris, that amendment wasn't moved, so I'm asking you
Okay,
to
so
move
this
this
is
one
just,
instead.
okay, I'll just move, on page 2, line 5, insert the following. Of this amount, 300,000 is designated to plan, design, equip, and install pedestrian lighting along Southern Boulevard. Councilors, back in 2016, we passed 500,000 for pedestrian and street lights on Southern Boulevard, and then the director of the Department of Municipal Development at the time told me that we couldn't do the lights that we wanted, which were the combo pedestrian street lights, like they have all along Central, the nice ones that are combo lights. They told me that that because the walkway was too far away from the street, it couldn't be done. But then shortly after they built the street lights, all the lights on Central popped up, where they just put arms on them to solve that problem. So now we have a shortage of a project that the council already passed. I don't know if it'll take 300,000. We'll split the money other ways if it doesn't. But this is a project that's already been passed and funded and passed and appropriated by the voters and all that stuff, and now we're short.
Second. There's a motion, a second for floor amendment number 5. Any discussion? Councilor Jones?
Okay, I'm sorry, Councilor Harris, maybe I just couldn't hear you. I couldn't understand
Okay.
what you were saying. So where's the 300,000 coming from?
Let's see, this amendment adds, I think it just doesn't,
So where's it come from?
it's just designating it.
Madam
So where's it
President,
coming from?
Yeah, Councilor Harris, so I drafted item, let's see, I drafted item F for you to move in the case that their amendment was moved and passed. That didn't happen. So I'm asking you actually to move G so that we can move that money from the Tijeras Bridge project and you can get your lighting project. So
Okay.
that's, unless you want to designate money into a line that doesn't include the street lighting, so.
Okay, the Harris Bridge project, whose project is that?
So tell me again where the money's coming from?
Okay. Madam President, Councilor Harris, you have two options here. You can designate money in the pedestrian safety and intersection improvement line outright,
Okay.
or you can move $300,000 from the Tijeras Bridge project, which is in Councilor Davis's district, for the same purpose. And those
Okay.
are the two amendments I have drafted for you and that are in front of you.
Okay, I'd like to hear from Councilor Davis about that.
I think a point of order is my understanding that the Amendment F, which we didn't consider, was contingent on Amendment C passing, which would have changed some of the Tijeras Bridge funding. So I think we would prefer that we not do that since the underlying amendment didn't pass. So I think this is just designating of the $1 million in safety and intersection improvements, $300,000 for Southern Boulevard, which I would support.
Okay, I'll, with that friendly amendment, can we have Crystal make that so? Oh, in terms of, but I'm not sure if that's exactly what the amendment
Yeah.
says.
Actually, that's already drafted, so that's what you read into the record.
That's what I read into,
Yeah.
is it designation?
Mhm.
Okay, so this amendment doesn't ask for the Tijeras Bridge. Okay, so I read what Councilor Davis just said? Okay, then urge your support.
Councilor Jones?
Okay, so where's the money coming from? I'm sorry, it's a simple question.
Okay, Madam President, Councilor Jones, in this case, with the amendment that was moved, this would be a simple designation within the safety and intersection improvement line, which is now at $1 million. So it would
With
be.
no specific use other than
Yes.
that. And so
Yes, ma'am.
300,000 of that would go specifically to this. All right, thank you. Thank you, Director.
Any additional discussion, administration? Councilor Borrego?
Southern Boulevard Northeast rather than Southern Boulevard Rio Rancho?
Yes, that's Southern Boulevard Southeast, actually, which is
City of
south of
Albuquerque.
Central. Yeah, yep.
So there's a motion and a second for floor amendment number 5. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion passes. Item H, which would be floor amendment number 6. Counselor Harris.
Thank you, Madam President. This amendment does two things. One is it just clarifies that the money for the metropolitan redevelopment area can be used in the area or the plan, because there are some items in that plan, particularly like the archaeological site, which is actually not in the actual MRA, it's adjacent to it. So just to clarify that you can use the money for whatever in the plan as well as whatever in the area, which I think is kind of implicit anyway. And also, back in 2013, I believe, we had $3 million in the East Gateway Metropolitan Redevelopment Area because of some things that have gotten spent down, including overage on a community center and some other things. We're actually down to about 0. So this just brings us about halfway to where we were, like, I think 6 years ago. So what this amendment does, of this amount, no less than $1.5 million shall be expended to acquire land, plan, design, demolish, renovate, and construct infrastructure facilities and implement improvements to support private sector development in the East Gateway Metropolitan Redevelopment Area or projects contained in the East Gateway Metropolitan Redevelopment Plan. This just gives the administration freedom to move money from the MRA fund, if it should come up with some, into East Gateway. There's a lot of things happening up on East Central. There's some land that's owned by the State Land Office. We have a new mayor as well as a new land commissioner, and negotiations with the State Land Office over the last years have just not really gone very far. They've been wanting to us to enter into a 99-year lease, and the administration at the time wasn't up for that. And now there's some new people who are in charge at the land office as well as in the city, and as well as other things that are happening in terms of some projects on East Central that we could really use the money for. This might be a very good timing for that.
Thank you. So there's a motion and a second for floor amendment number 6. Is there any discussion? Counselor Jones, followed by Counselor Benton.
Thank you. You're going to love this. So our MR account has $2 million in it? 2.5? And so you're wanting to designate for this one particular area 1.5 of that when you don't have anything planned for there?
1.5, but there could be other money moved in from other areas if we have it.
I'm sorry, I can't.
There could be other money from other within the MRA fund. It just says that it doesn't, that we're not capping it at 1.5 necessarily.
But it says no less than, so that
Yep.
means you could take all 2.5 million.
I can't take it. I mean, the administration
You could
would
use
have-
it for this.
Pardon me? Possibly.
And are there other counselors who have MR money that, I mean, do they have projects that could be worked on with MR money too?
Yes.
Okay. The answer was yes.
Counselor Benton.
Thank you.
Yeah, the department, the planning department actually had money proposed in the budget for Historic Central MRA, which is within my District 2. I favor funding the MR agency, but I don't favor this type of designation for MR funds. These funds should be flexible and available when there's a project on tap. What I'm hearing from you, Councilor Harris, is that a bunch of things may be happening, but I haven't heard anything that is happening, and I think these funds should be left in a general Metropolitan Redevelopment Fund.
Madam President. I know we will get to the end of this. I just want to point out to Councilor Benton's point that in the floor sub that's currently before us, there is 2.5 total in MRA areas, but 1.5 of that 2.5 is already designated on page 6, lines 30 through 33 for the East Gateway MRA area. So a majority of the money is already designated for that area. I'm not sure that I'm comfortable expanding that or allowing it for projects in the outside of the MRA area without a better discussion from the council and perhaps an appropriation. And so maybe this is a better for the appropriation section if and when we get there.
Counselor Harris.
Just to reiterate, this begins the process of restoring money that's been lost over years. So this is not funding that because of shortfalls in other projects. The MR fund, which you've been building up in East Central, which is a citywide policy, which is Route 66. So this just restores funding that's been depleted because the council didn't fund other projects that are actually not even MR projects typically. So so that's just asking for the council's help to restore money that brings us, well, just with this halfway back to where we were half a decade ago.
Counselor Sanchez.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to suspend the rules and move the meeting till 11 p.m.
There's a motion and a second to suspend the rules to move the meeting to 11 p.m. All those in favor say yes. Yes. Opposed, no. Motion passes. So, Counselor Harris, were you done? Counselor Borrego.
Gosh, there's a couple of things that I want to support you, Counselor Harris, but I can't support the way that this is written. Typically, the way that redevelopment projects are done is we have a specific project, and we support the city portion of that. And this says to support private sector development. Somehow, to me, that almost sounds like anti-donation, and I don't think that, I think that, it's like committing money, public money, and I understand that MR funds are used to leverage, a project, and
We could take out the word private sector if you like.
we can, but is there a specific project that you're thinking
There's a
of?
lot of, there's Franklin Plaza, there's a land office. Private sector, all that means is what, I think you probably even worked on this project, you're talking about the Talon Market. That was, we bought the land and then we sold it to private sector. That's what it means by support. We're not allowed to actually give money to, we're not talking about doing anything that's unconstitutional.
So are any of these projects going to be leveraging money back into the MR fund as a result of this through taxes?
If it works
or-
out well, that'd be the idea, of course.
I wonder what, I'd like to hear from Mr. Campbell, maybe? Could you? And I worked on this, I have to say, I worked on the East Gateway Plan, and I support this, but I'm a little concerned about how we're doing this.
Madam President, Councilor
Campbell.
Borrego, is there a question there?
The question is it appropriate for us to just say there could be a project, or is it more likely that we would have a project, and that project we could actually leverage those funds like we did at the theater block, or we did with Albuquerque High, or we did with the Bell Trading Post, or I could go on, but
Sure.
I'm concerned about how we're, designating that money just for
Right.
something that could come.
And it wouldn't be the first time that we've designated particular areas for this, but the metropolitan redevelopment, we have over 20 metropolitan redevelopment areas spread throughout the city with a preponderance of them all along Central, from Tramway to Unser. And I think the discussion that you've had tonight about the possibility for flexibility is important, because without a specific plan, we need to be able to be nimble and be able to respond to the needs when they come up. You're tonight deciding a 2-year capital plan, and it would be difficult to say exactly what the opportunities may be in between now and the next 2 years. I hope that answers your question.
Counselor Sanchez.
Thank you, Madam President. Let me quickly just say that Albuquerque's west side and the west central area has truly benefited from the MRA. I know that there's a dire need still in the east gateway to the city in Counselor Harris's district, so I would hope that we can support his initiatives and his needs based on, what we've done on Albuquerque's west side.
Counselor Gibson.
So we already know that there are MR areas throughout the city. I'm very interested in including more of District 7. Right now, there's 0 in District 7, but there needs to be. There's areas that are really, really blighted and they need help. So, we already have 1.5 million designated for East Central. and maybe that's a mistake, but I think that it's a fine line to go, to say at least 1.5. I just think we should leave it the way it is. I don't think I can support this. Thank you.
Counselor Jones.
You sound excited. Thank you, Madam President. I believe I've been prompted to say if you are going to amend the amendment, we'll have to suspend the rules to amend the amendment.
What kind of amendment do you want?
So, well,
Thought you were going to amend this to a no less than, or, but if you do, if anybody does, we have to amend the rules to,
Oh,
we have
I
to
see.
suspend the rules to amend the amendment.
well, I want to say that, you know, I really want to support Counselor Harris on this. We just actually tapped into, for Nuevo Atrisco, we just tapped into the MRA fund to the tune of, I think, $1.5 million. And I know that, you know, there's a lot of momentum, a lot of good things are happening along West Central. And, you know, when we're talking about dedications of funds, I understand where Counselor Betton's coming from in terms of the issue for the MRA dollars, but if you look at this budget and some of the dedications that are in here, you know, there's, Counselor Betton, I think, you know, both us with what we did with the MRA this past year and some of the projects that you're going to have going in your district, I think we can afford to support Counselor Harris in his request to get some dollars, much needed dollars to the east side. So with that, I would support your amendment, Counselor Harris, and I'll put it to you to close.
Well, there's no harm in asking for a vote, so urge your support.
Abstain because I wrote this plan.
No. So, yeah. Can she abstain? Do you want to abstain? All those in favor of floor amendment number 6, say yes and raise your hand. Yes. Yes. Opposed, no? So that's a 5-2? 6-2? Okay, and we have one more, and that is item C, which is Pena, Davis, and Betton. And I would like to ask the additional sponsors what their pleasure is to do with this amendment.
Madam
Counselor
President,
Davis.
Madam President, I'll defer to you on this one. That you're the one who started, you're the one who drafted it. I'll defer to you.
Counselor Betton. So how does this impact what we've done so far if we move this amendment?
Yes, Madam President, so based on the passage of Councilor Borrego's amendment, did that pass?
No, it did not.
No. Oh, then this is not affected. However, that same information is contained in your amendment, so.
Okay, so I will go ahead and move floor amendment number, what would it be, 6?
That would be 7, Madam President.
7. Floor amendment number 7. Is there a second?
I'll second it, but I need clarification.
Sure.
I'm assuming that we would, based on the previous votes, we would alter it.
Yes, if that's the will of the council. We would have to remove a couple lines from it.
Thank you.
So on the previous votes, would we put them up for reconsideration if we go through it?
Madam President, that's up to you as a sponsor. Yeah, otherwise, I would need to remove, you would need to remove items 21 and 22 from the amendment.
21 and 22? Yeah, would we need to suspend the rules to do that?
I don't believe so.
Madam President.
Mr. Aguilar?
Madam President, yes.
We would? So, so if we moved floor amendment number 7, and if I made an amendment to suspend the rules to reconsider as part of this package 21 and 22, would that be?
Point of order, ma'am. I'd like an explanation of this. This is a bill that's sponsored by 3 counselors, and I think it's going a little far to say that we can't amend our own amendment.
Madam President, Councilor Benton, The council certainly can amend the amendment, but as Section 7 of the Council Rules of Procedure, all amendments to the capital improvement plan must be submitted at least 48 hours before the meeting on which it is before final action. So the council certainly can move to amend the amendment as was previously done.
I understand that, but I question whether that was the intent of that rule. If it was, then councilors, we need to amend that rule, and we need to do it soon.
So I'm asking a question. I'm not sure whether we can do it that way. Can we do it that way?
Madam President, the council can move to suspend the rules, which would require a 2/3 vote in order to amend the amendment in its current form.
So if I make a motion to suspend the rules to reconsider on floor amendment number 7, 21 and 22, I can do that.
So, Madam President, I'm taking Mr. Aguilar's advice as saying that if you want to move your Amendment C and you want to remove lines 21 and 22, that you need to suspend the rules.
Madam President, that is correct.
But what if I don't want to remove it?
Then you.
So then I don't need to?
Correct.
So then I can, so then I move floor amendment number 7. Was there a second? So there's a motion and a second for floor amendment number 7. Is there any discussion? Councilor Sanchez.
Thank you, Madam President. I have a question for Mr. Melendres and also Mr. Aguilera regarding this legislation. There are several changes in this bill. Should they be addressed individually as floor substitutes, or are they based on what we have here? Can we vote on this as one bill? Is this correctly done procedurally by basically doing what's been introduced?
Madam President, Councilor Sanchez, the procedure to amend from this point, any of the details of the legislation as written would be to suspend the rules in order to.
Yeah, basically, this looks somewhat like a floor substitute. And there's several amendments in this bill as one amendment. Should we be voting on this procedurally, individually, or as one bill?
My apologies. So Madam President, Councilor Sanchez, if I'm understanding your question correctly, can C, which is now floor amendment 7, be voted in its entirety, or do you have to go line by line? If that is the question, it can be voted all together.
Okay, and Mr. Melendres?
So, Madam President, Councilor Sanchez, there's no clear guidance in the rules. So I think what the council needs to look at is what the intent of its rules contemplated. When the council amended its rules a few years ago to require that floor subs not be acted upon at the meeting which they were moved, and the rules relative to the CIP that require prior presentation, it contemplated a type of bill that was relatively comprehensive, and amendments being more of a one-off type of instances. And so I think that the council has a little bit of latitude on how to treat this particular one. It's really discretionary as to whether or not you believe it is sort of acting like a floor sub, but is really in the guise of amendments in order to keep the spirit of the council rules in place. With that said, to the extent that the way to settle that, I think, is by a vote of the council, and to the extent that the council wants to treat these as one amendment and is okay with that, then I think that could probably be an initial motion. If that fails, if that passes, I think that would express the will of the council to accept this as one large amendment. If that fails, then I think that would express the will of the council to treat these as individual amendments, in which case you'd be free to make those individual amendments.
So procedurally, whether we go as one bill or one amendment or several different amendments, it's not going to make any difference.
Madam Madam President, Councilor Sanchez, it's a novel question relative to the council rules, and the council rules don't describe where an amendment begins and ends and where a flow sub begins and ends. This was presented as an amendment, a very long amendment, and I think you could vote on it that way.
I'd like to get the position of the sponsors of this legislation.
I submitted it as one amendment. You know, there's just some adjustments throughout the CIP that are made within this. None of them so substantial that it would require a standalone. So, Councilor Davis. Councilor Benton.
This wasn't my preferred approach, Madam President. I mean, I agreed to put my name on it so that we'd at least have something to discuss, but I have to say that my desire and intention was made very clear in discussions that I thought that these should individually show where each item came from and goes to, and to vote them up one at a time all the way through, and I think we would have been better off had we done that, but here we are. You know, again, we did vote on the Cibola Loop, affordable housing. I'm sorry, Councilor Borrego, for my vote. I just, you know, but I think this illustrates the confusion that we're going through right now, illustrates the problem with effectively doing a floor sub via an amendment, and that's just what it is and what it looks like, and so
Madam President,
I have a concern about that.
I'm looking at the third page of this amendment, 3 out of page 3 to 4. Is that the right one? Let me make sure I have the right. There's just so much.
Excuse me, Madam President, I'd like to move to suspend the rules once again and extend this meeting till 11:15 p.m.
There's a motion and a second to extend to suspend the rules to extend the time to 11:15. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion passes.
And this is just one I spotted because we had so much discussion on it, but I have, on page 3 of this amendment, you have explanation. The amendment makes the following changes from Councilor Jones's floor sub. Then there's streets, and then you get to the fourth line down, streets, Second Street, 1.4 million, amendment 1 million. So does that conflict with an amendment we already passed?
As I read it, it does not. It would remove the. It was at 1.4 in the floor sub. We took out $1 million for the storm drain. This would remove the remaining $400,000.
Okay, so there's not anything that conflicts with anything else we've done in this kind of omnibus amendment.
So, any other discussion? Councilor Winter, followed by Councilor Jones.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to clarify what the procedure was and how this was introduced. Was it introduced as an amendment? Was it introduced as a floor sub? And when was it introduced? And did it follow the rules?
Madam President, Councilor Winter, this was prepared as an amendment on Thursday as it was given to me by the sponsors. I actually did prepare a floor substitute for these same items on that was described to me on Wednesday. So I took the sponsors' wishes and we created this amendment. It was to all 3 sponsors on Friday afternoon. They elected not to have that out in the bill books this weekend, and it was included, of course, in the packet when the meeting started today.
Thank you, Madam President. So what we're taking, if these amendments kind of look like a floor substitute to me, so I guess it's when were they introduced, when were they brought? So I just need some clarification on that.
Madam President, Councilor Winter, so the requested changes were brought to myself, council staff, on Wednesday of last week, which was the deadline for floor substitutes. I did prepare a floor substitute and send it out to all the councilors, both Councilor Jones' version and Councilor Pena's. On Thursday, I was told by the sponsors that they would like an amendment instead, and that's what I prepared on having known that on Thursday, which was the deadline for council staff to be aware of any amendments.
Madam President, one last question. So if I want to challenge this as this being a floor substitute, what's the procedure for that?
Okay, so timing-wise, the bill was presented as a floor sub in substantial compliance. However, there was a determination at that point that it should be proceed as amendments instead. I think that your remedy, to the extent that you feel that this is inappropriate and it's a floor sub, would be to vote against the proposal. Because I think the practical matter settles this question. Because to the extent that the individual numbers are voted on within this amendment, many of them, if not all, most, are interdependent upon one another. So as a practical matter, it's sort of a package. It looks, in that sense, it looks like a floor sub. There's nothing in the rules to prevent, at this time, an amendment to be submitted in multiple parts like this. So there's having no guidance in the rules in that way. I think that the council, in order to sort of object to this type of procedure, would be to vote down the amendment.
Councillor Jones, followed by Councillor Harris.
Thank you. It was originally proposed that amendments be the major amendments that were made to the floor substitute that I put forward at the right time. The general consensus was that the changes that would be made would be done with amendments at the city council meeting. The reason was that was done with the majority of the council agreed that we should be very open and transparent about amendments and changes to that. So I will, I would like to tell the people watching and what's going on what those amendments were that amount to this floor sub or amendment or whatever we're going to call it. And here they are. From the original, the floor sub or amendment that we're talking about right now, changed ADA sidewalk improvements from $400,000 to $1 million. In other words, added $600,000 to street and ADA sidewalk. It added $700,000 to street safety and intersection improvement. It removed $100,000 from advanced right-of-way acquisition. It removed $500,000 from Tijeras Bridge replacement. It removed $400,000 from 2nd Street. It added $15,000 to streets, trails, and bikeways. Added $250,000 to West Side Indoor Sports Complex. Removed $250,000 from fire apparatus rehab and replacement. Added $250,000 to facility rehab. Removed $70,000 from ABQ Ride, support vehicles, moved and made no change, but basically moved some money from balloon museum facility to overall museum facility, so that was a wash. Removed, added $175,000 to civic underground parking repairs, removed $200,000 from civic underground emergency something, NOx. Removed $500,000 from affordable housing. Added $500,000 to Cibola Loop Community Center. Removed $50,000 from Metropolitan Redevelopment Area. Removed $320,000 of $420 from the business application technology, and removed all of cybersecurity amounting to $100,000.
Councillor Harris.
First, I think I'd like to answer Councillor Winter's questions like what's the remedy? I think the remedy is to take it to the council and say this doesn't seem right, and make your argument. And by the way, Councillor, I think I kind of agree with you. And really, as I look at this, you know what this looks like to me? It looks like a cleanup bill. This looks like a cleanup bill. Let's handle it that way. I think I don't want to support this amendment because one of my constituents texted me and said, I'm so confused. What the heck is going on? And, you know, and I'm confused and I'm sitting up here. So I think that these are kind of a whole bunch of little lines moving in a broader scheme of things. Some of this money is not insignificant, but a lot of it in a broader scheme of things, you know, $50,000 here and there, that's kind of like cleanup stuff. So let's, and I think Councilor Borrego has a concern about her affordable housing money. I think we can maybe clean some of this stuff up later.
Thank you, Madam President. So I have a question and a comment. My question is, what is the underground NOx? Civic Underground Emergency NOx. Can does anybody, Mr. Al, Ms. Nair, do you know what
I think I know what that is. Fire suppression system and changes to fire suppression system in the underground garage.
Okay, so that doesn't seem like a good move to zero that out. I have a problem with that. And the other thing, at the very bottom, the business application technology as well as cybersecurity, leaving $100,000 for only the application and nothing for cybersecurity, that's a recipe for disaster. We're already having issues now here in City Hall, and I'm afraid that if our cybersecurity and information systems is not adequately funded, then those problems can really become catastrophic. So, thank you. That's it.
Okay, Counselor Benton.
Keep this brief. I just wanted to, for the record, I wasn't part of the discussion to not have this in the bill book this over the weekend. I was expecting it was going to be there.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, but I'm sure it's for the record, so.
It was for the record.
So, okay, well, I wanted to, Counselor Benton's changed his mind, so I actually just wanted to put this thing forward for discussion purposes because I had intended not to submit it there at the end, but I know Counselor, I was actually trying to take an attempt at trying to salvage Counselor Borrego's dollars. So, but with that, I will just withdraw my amendment. So what is, I can just withdraw it? Do I have to make a motion? I'm just withdrawing it. Okay, so with that, I think we're done with our amendments. We have floor amendments 1 through 6. And with that, to the sponsor to close, and I just want to say congratulations, Councillor Jones. I know each one of us gave you a headache, me in particular, but I think you did a wonderful job with this budget.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to move approval of floor substitute 2R19-120 as amended.
There's a motion, a second for floor sub 2R19-120 as amended. For an approval, all those in favor say yes. Yes. Opposed, no. Motion passes, and with that, seeing there's no further business, this meeting is adjourned.